rooster kind of keeps the peace within the flock. So I've got 5 hens and 1 rooster. You know, so he keeps everybody happy. You know,
it's like the cool. Markovs.
I'm just telling you, 5 or 6 eggs a day. It's pretty amazing.
Eggs are cheap. I get a dozen eggs for $3.
My eggs are free.
You're getting sweatshop eggs for $3 a dozen, man.
Yeah, what kind of eggs are you getting for $3 a dozen?
$3.26 for 12 eggs from Rose Hours. I don't know what you guys are paying for eggs, but that's what they call
those are sweatshop eggs, man.
No, they're not. You buy
$3?
You buy your groceries from Harvest Market, which is like going to like Dean and DeLuca in Soho.
No, it's not. It's the fucking thrift way. It's been given some shishi name, and it's the same shit it always was. But every single item in the store costs a minimum of $1 more than it costs in Head River.
Yeah, exactly. I get my free range, whatever that means, free range eggs for $3.26 a dozen.
I will say my first egg cost me $1,000. Because that's what it cost me to build the coop and get the chickens and all the stuff, $1,000. So, but I probably got 1,500 eggs after that. So, what kind of dogs you get, Lewis?
Medium
Golden
brown. He's got a face kind of like a Jack Russell Terrier and a body kind of like a greyhound.
Bring him up. Let's see him.
I think he just left to go kayaking with Darby.
Oh, okay.
So are we going to start like the show today and bring in Scott? Or are we just doing the interview with Scott as a standalone thing, and we're starting the show officially on Monday?
Let's start right now. Are you guys ready?
Fucking born ready.
Holy crap! I don't even know what number we're on. Hold on.
1.
Episode 1.
Season 2.
This is season 2. Episode 1.
Technically 89. Okay.
We just like pretend like we haven't been gone for a year and a half or whatever it's been.
Yeah, let's just act like nothing happened.
Well, it's got a lot of things backed up. He's been just dying to get out.
They come and they go. Like you know how it goes. Like something's really eating at you for a week or so, and then you move on.
All right, we got a lot to cover. Welcome to episode 89 of the Hammer Factor, officially episode 1 of season 2. On our show, we have co-host Lewis Geltman, policy director for the Outdoor Alliance, co-host John Weld, co-owner of Immersion Research, and I'm the producer here at the show, John Grace. We've got a lot to catch up on. It's been a minute. We've got some green race behind the scenes we're going to cover. We've got the amazing Scott Shipley on to discuss all kind of things, but primarily modifying riverbeds. Is that a good way to talk about it?
Yeah. Well, the whole thing's on what happened at Go Left before the green race.
Yep. You just stole my thunder right there, big dog. And we're going to go into a breakdown of a river rescue that happened at Go Left on the Friday before the green race with Evan Dyer, Pete Frazier, Robbie Gilson, Emmylou Kronzer, and maybe more. Rants and raves, policy update, and all of the good stuff. Okay, now what were you going to say about modifying rivers?
Well, that's what made me think of Shipley. Because there's been, we have this back east, we have this Lower Yaak. This is a river called the Lower Yaak, and it has a one rapid has been responsible for about 50% of the deaths. It's a very busy river. Kayakers know this river. But there's been talk of filling in Dimple or blasting out of the river, and I think Shipley has some insight into that.
That'll be interesting to hear.
Yeah.
So what are you boys been up to in the last year and a half?
Making kayaking gear mostly.
Yeah. Have you been kayaking?
How many times did you guys have someone come up to you and ask you when we're going to start recording the Hammer Factor in the past year?
Well, I can say through the Russell Fork race up through the green race, and this is no joke, probably 60 people over the course of a week or so.
Was it the same person?
Talk to a lot more people than I do.
Yeah, it was kind of like, I don't know how it made me feel. It kind of like was people really weren't interested in talking to me or what I've been up to. They're like, "Hey, John, good to see you out here. So when do you do another Hammer Factor?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's great. My family's good. I've been."
Yeah. I'd go to stores to talk about kayaking gear, and they'd be like, yeah. When are you guys doing Hammer Factor?
Well, we're back, and we're kind of charging forward here.
So if we never left.
Can we put? I want to put a pin on the North Fork Championship, and in a future episode, come back to that.
Okay.
Can we get the Voorhees to come on and really take a dive into that?
We can certainly try. What would you want to cover there?
I just want to know what, listen, you run a kayaking event. Kara, my wife, runs a kayaking event. It's tough. It's tough business, right?
It's pretty thankless. There's no doubt.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely cited the insurance as part of it, right? But you guys are insured.
We are. It's a bigger hurdle.
Yeah.
It's definitely something to overcome, but it's, something you can figure out. There's a lot of moving pieces there, So you gotta, yeah, we should do an event show. Because if I get into that road, it'll, I could take a deep dive into that one.
Right. I don't know. I think that's interesting.
But how was Green Race?
It was pretty amazing this year. We had our biggest race ever, 191 racers. We had, we experienced a drought here in the Southeast, our first one that we've had in probably 5 years, I think. And kind of low water means high water. So we get extra water from the dam. So we had like a solid foot on the gauge, which would be like 150% or something like that. We had the most juniors, 25 juniors this year in the race. We had the most ladies. We had 13 ladies race this year. We had our first mother-son team, Buffy Burge and Curtis Burge race this year. We had a new champion in the men's division. We had definitely the most spectators we've ever had down in there. We had the biggest festival we've ever had. Something I want to brag about a little bit is we had definitely the biggest live show we've ever had. And it was really cool because we were looking over the analytics. We sent out like a sponsor report today, and we had 25 different countries watch, 47 states watched the race in the U.S. and 274 different cities worldwide. So I think
we had a viewing party at IR that was well attended, although the bridge is closed between Oregon and Washington that weekend. So
how does that go? Like, tell me, like, it's a long bit of racing, there's like, it lasts for like 4 hours when you watch it. Like, what's the flow of the day like for everybody in there? I'm always interested in that.
I don't know. I show up for like an hour. I watched Dane race. I watched Buffy race.
Is Kara around or anybody who was there?
Yeah, no, like we have people. We have people.
Yeah.
I watched for a couple hours and then I had things to do. But people were digging it for sure. We had coffee and donuts, and it was 8:30 a.m. our time or something when the race started. But
I was really interested to see how the Vanguard was going to do at the Green Race. Like, have you guys paddled that boat?
Oh yeah,
I think it's mind-blowingly good. But I was curious if maybe it would not be fast enough for the Green Race.
I mean, it swept both classes.
Yeah.
And that, I mean,
well, not swept, right? I mean, what was,
it didn't was
second, and
yeah, didn't sweep, but it definitely won both classes. And, and I honestly, and from my opinion, I think, not to take anything away from Kaylin Friedenson, who was the men's champ this year, but I feel like that boat made a few seconds, and it just goes to show you, like, the technology. That's the only version 2 race boat. That's the only version 2 longboat. All the other ones are still in version 1 that came along. And you can see, like, you can watch it on the water and be like, oh, wow, Snowy really improved like the race boat design.
It's so good. Like, I mean, not to travel back in time to the 8 months ago that we missed, but I mean, it was 9 out of the top 10 in men's kayak at the LW race after, years of thinking that, like, not even sure if anybody could go faster in a long boat than a short boat, but it just does all the things that, all the things you want a longboat to do. It feels like skippy and dynamic and stays on top like a modern short boat, but with that glide that you get from the longboats. And it's just so much easier to paddle than like the previous generation of boats. But
how would you compare it to
it's not as fast.
Scorch X?
It's a bit harder. I mean, it's harder to paddle than that. I mean, it's still a 12-foot kayak for sure. Like, I don't want to pretend like it's a creek boat or something, but it's much, much easier to paddle than like a green boat or Stinger for sure. But it's also, I would say, I mean, it's not like I've tested it or anything, but I would not think it was nearly as fast on flat water as one of those other boats.
Yeah, but there's just not that much flat water. You know what I mean? Like, as long as you got good skip and glide, like that's what you need for like a whitewater racing.
Yeah, for sure.
My whole problem with that boat, in fact, that is generation 2 makes even worse, is that this flies so much in the face of my prediction about Dagger and its private equity owners. It just doesn't add up. This is not helping my case one bit.
Well, they got Todd Wells and they got Snowy. So
I know. It's just a very niche boat. This is not the boat you'd think private equity would make, right?
Yeah. They must have snuck it in there somehow. They must have called it something different, the old man's cruiser,
Right. This is a crossover boat for crossover fishing.
Crossover bass boat.
Right.
That must be how they got it in there. I don't know. It was very interesting to watch it out there and to see, I just got to echo exactly what you said, Lewis. It was easier to paddle. It was quicker on the dime. It wasn't locked in on a rail, like kind of the V1 longboats.
It's like totally restored my enthusiasm for longboating. Like, I was over it.
Can we change? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. I mean, I guess to go back to like the Little White race, I mean, I think the way, like, the backstory on how we got there was like 2 years ago. Everybody was like, what are we going to do with the Scorch Axe? Like, are we going to let people race this 10-foot boat or not? And like, what should the rules be? And I think, everybody sort of felt like, well, like, there's all these people who paddle the Scorch Axe every day. It's their favorite boat. It sucks to tell somebody that, like, the boat that you can't paddle every day, the boat that you paddle every day that you like the best, like, you can't race that and you have to go paddle something slower for a race. Like, that felt shitty. But then it was like, okay, if we just change the rule to 10 feet, then everybody has to go buy a Scorch Axe, even if you don't want one. And so we were like, okay, let's just open it up. And, at least then people have options and we'll see what happens. And Todd Wells won 2 years ago in that prototype Vanguard, but like the prototype Vanguard was like way harder to paddle. And, it was still like, I think 2 people raced the longboats. Todd won, and then Galen was like out of the top 10. And it was still like kind of an open question. And, I think a lot of people, like, when we were sort of asking around, like, should, taking a little poll of like, what should the rules be? And I think a lot of people, like myself included, were like voted for longboats just on principle, even if we didn't actually want to paddle a longboat on the Little White. Like, I was sort of thinking about it and like racing the green boat, and I'm like, I don't know, like, this is probably gonna kind of suck, but like, just on principle, I'm gonna say yes. And then they came out with that Vanguard, and everybody kind of got their hands on one at the last minute, and it was like mind-blowingly good, like actually legitimately fun to paddle, not just something you were suffering through to put down a good time. And that was cool.
Yeah, it's like the first race kayak that stays on the surface and you can turn it.
Yeah, it's like you get those like skippy dynamic feelings like you get in like the Stees or something that are so compelling, and it's also just like fast. It's good.
Boat length, like in whitewater racing, is it's like a topic that I've been wrestling with ever since I've been involved with the green race, and it even reared its head again this year when we did the Royal Gauntlet, the slalom race at the end, because, I was talking to Dane about doing that like over the summer. There's hoops you have to get through with permitting and whatever to hang gates and all that kind of stuff. And so it came together and I was like, all right, Dane, you got to do the gates, whatever. And he's like, we got to make this a short boat race. And I was like, well, what's that mean? And he's like, well, it's 9.6. And I was like, well, what about this boat? It's 9.8. What about the Scorch? It's like 10 feet, just like what you're talking about, and, and the way the course was set up, if you were in a Vanguard, you weren't going to win that race, so it was going to be a more maneuverable boat. And, my kind of stance was like, the course is going to decide what boat you paddle. We don't need to like restrict a length, and back when it was like, God, we did that. It was 8'6" for a while with like, that was your short boat class. And then the Remix 79 came along and people were like, well, I got this boat. I want to race the short boats. I want to share it. And then people were like, whatever. And it's 9'6". And I don't know. It's kind of weird. Like imagine in like freestyle kayaking, if they were like, you have to have a boat over 7 feet. Like where would the designs have gone? It would totally impede the designs, like you would never have the modern freestyle kayak if you said, well, there's a length limit. It can't go under 7 feet, like, I don't know. I feel like
it's also like, it's like the point of the short boat is like to make it so that you can paddle the boat that you paddle every day. And like, as soon as companies start coming out with like race specific short boats and you need a special boat to race, then there's no justification for having like a rule anymore. As far as I'm concerned, it's like, just open it up and whatever.
I fully agree with that, especially in such like a young, like whitewater racing. People think it's been around, like we've been racing for a long time, but like there's 25, it's really just happening, in my opinion. So I don't know. I've wrestled with the boat length. I'd be interested to hear what our listeners think.
I was watching that gauntlet race and I was just thinking like how awkward must feel. Like, I mean, at that point, half those guys at least probably have not sat in a short boat in a month, right?
Yeah. Like... yeah. And a lot of people commented on that, but it was good. They like got a good warm up paddling them in. So everybody was like, oh, I'm glad I got a chance to paddle that, like paddling in, because it's the acceleration, it's just totally different. But it was a great race. It was sick. Everybody was safe. That's our biggest concern. Go left was definitely marginal this year. Did you guys hear about any of this?
Yeah.
Just from you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know how many boats have went through Go Left. There's been very few pins over the years through that rapid, especially in like a creek boat or a long boat. In the Tuesday leading up to the race, we had 5 pins in Go Left. And one was really bad that resulted in a resuscitation that we'll get into later on the show here. But somebody was like, something has changed. Well, when the water's off, we had a picture from Chris Hargis from like 20 years ago that he took at green versus one that was there. And there was a new rock that had settled down in the bottom of the river. And that's what was pinning the boats. So I'm not sure where I was going with that, but it's pretty compelling that that small little change can make such a big difference over, decades of boats going through there with really minimal problems to 5 pinning in 4 days.
I mean, I guess that's where I thought we were going with this conversation about riverbed modification. It's not so much the feasibility from Shipley, but the ethic of it.
Sure.
Yeah. Should we get Shipley on before we talk about that?
Shipley's ready.
Have him chime in.
All right. Let me give me a second here.
Like, we should fix all of them.
And I should get the contract. I don't know.
We'll get some rapid blocks in there and fix that thing right up.
I mean, like, I want to wait for Scott to get on here to talk about it.
Stand by.
Man, I haven't talked to Shipley in ages.
I got to ask him about the Woodfin Wave, the whitewater park that's coming to Asheville.
Left me a voicemail like 6 months ago that I forgot to call him back about. So now I'm anxious.
Ooh, he could be upset.
We could find out what it is that I inadvertently blew him off about.
Lewis, your mic sounds great today. Is that a new one?
No, it's the same one. The only thing is I don't have any feedback on it, so I can't hear it. I feel like I'm constantly at like a different distance from the mic, and I'm not noticing that I'm doing that.
It doesn't have a mix minus on it?
I don't think so.
Let's give Shipley an introduction. What's his? I mean, he's got credentials out the wazoo.
He's
here.
the greatest American men's K1 slalom athlete ever. Does anybody want to contest that?
No,
I don't think.
I mean, it's hard for people to understand nowadays, but that was a thing. Like back in the 80s and 90s, like that carried a lot more weight than it does now. It seems like.
I think Evie's kind of bringing it back a little bit to the U.S. But he was a veteran of 3 Olympic Games, 92, 96, and 2000. Has 4 world titles under his belt. World Cup titles. He won 3 silver medals in the K1 event at the ICF Canoe Slalom World Championship, earning them in 1995, 97, and 99. Hang on, he's chiming in here. And in 2020, he became the U.S. national champion in C2. He is the leader, I believe, of S2O, global leader in whitewater park design and engineering. And welcome to this show, Scott Shipley. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. How are you guys? Can you hear me?
All right. That was pretty smooth. We haven't done this in a while, and I think we just crushed your introduction right there.
Nice. Good timing, huh?
Yeah. So, I just introduced kind of some of your accolades here from your paddling career. No one on the show decided to argue that you were the greatest representative K1 in Olympic competition that we've ever had.
I keep telling my kids that, and then Dane Jackson shows up in town. I don't know what to say anymore.
So tell us a little bit about your career now, S2O, what that does and what's going on with you.
Yeah, I have a few questions about that too before we get into the topic at hand. Also,
S2O is a river engineering firm that specializes in whitewater park design. And so, as I was racing kayaks, I was also going to engineering school. And when I got out, I started working for another firm that did whitewater parks, and did that for a while, and started to think about how we wanted to do it a different way. And so started our own, or I guess my own firm. And we do pumped whitewater parks, which are things like the U.S. National Whitewater Center or the recently opened Montgomery Whitewater Park. We also do in-stream parks like the Eagle Whitewater Park. So something where we're changing an existing river, a lot of times where it's been sort of channelized and confined in a downtown area, and they're looking to renaturalize it and use it as an asset for their town, so they can have, instead of having a factory run by it or development next to it, they're renaturalizing it and creating whitewater that can be a tourist attraction and something fun for their quality of life. And then we also do river restoration. So we're actually taking a whitewater park out right now in downtown Denver, and replacing it with a natural riverscape for about a mile of length through downtown, because they found that this whitewater park, one of the first whitewater parks in the world, was causing the river to sort of grade upstream and fill in with sediment. And that's now put a bunch of downtown Denver at flood risk where it wasn't before. And so we're remeandering it and putting in a bunch of natural plants that can help with that.
That confluence park downtown in
exactly.
Denver?
Yeah. And that'll lower the flood level sometimes by as much as 9 feet right next to the big stadium and stuff that are downtown. So actually doing the opposite of what we normally do.
That's fascinating. So was it when you first when that park went in, I'm assuming you didn't put that park in, did you?
We did not. Nope. That was somebody else. And actually a great thing for the sport in America when it happened, but things have evolved. And so people know more now and things are changing.
Yeah. So it was kind of the Wild West back then, huh?
It was a little bit the Wild West, but also I think very well done and responsibly done, but the computer models and things that we have now just didn't exist in the 80s, right? And so knowledge of how these things would have an impact weren't there. And that park was built at a diversion that they used to use to divert water out of the river for folks, and that's no longer needed. So that dam coming out is part of what we're doing, dam removal plus.
So you guys aren't the only ones building whitewater parks in the U.S., right?
That's true. Yeah, we have 2 or 3 competitors with different specialties in the field, and so there's other folks out there doing it, and some super exciting stuff that we're seeing that's happening now that we're kind of jealous that we haven't done. That's pretty neat to see.
So like, who's the typical customer for this kind of a project?
It depends on the project, but mostly we work for municipalities or developers. And so usually it's sort of one park spawns the rest. And so in Colorado, there were a few whitewater parks, and there was a huge economic impact. These parks, especially the in-stream ones, are free to use, but then people come to town, someplace like Golden, Colorado, and it starts to fill up hotel rooms and fill up businesses. You and I might go and sleep in the back of our car, but other people are staying in hotels and eating in restaurants and shopping in shops. And
these are whitewater kayakers bringing this business to town. It's not appealing to people outside of whitewater.
Well, it is, because those towns are seeing the economic, for Golden, it's probably $3 or $4 million a year in economic impact. For Durango, about $9 million from the whitewater. And so other towns are saying, how do I get that into my downtown? Because I want people to come to Montrose or Eagle or places like that aren't necessarily on the radar for other people.
Right. So what's the cost of a project like this? Like, what's the ballpark, or what's the range?
Your average in-stream park is between kind of 1 million and 5 million in general. And it depends a lot on the width of the river and how long you want that park to be. Right. So it can be as small as one drop structure that people surf on, and it can be as big as 2,000 feet of length with a bunch of different waves and features. And so that really affects the cost. The pump parks are very expensive. They're sort of in that 60, I guess, $50 to $90 million range.
I mean, that's it. I mean,
wow.
A project like that size has to be a pretty compelling economic story to be told there, right? Or how does...
Exactly. Yeah. And for a lot of folks, it's economic stimulus, which is why you start to see these things in places like Charlotte that's not traditionally a tourist destination, right? Unless you are into NASCAR or banking, you aren't thinking of Charlotte as your big destination, right? But same with Montgomery, right? They very much want to create the case that Montgomery is a great place to visit and a great place to work and live. And so this is something that differentiates them from other towns that are out there.
Yeah, I guess it's just crazy to me that a municipality would be like, whitewater kayaking is going to invigorate our economy. I'd be thinking, well, maybe they're going to be rafting or tubing or something else going on there.
Totally. And it surprises me, when I first got into this business and they said Golden has I think at that point in time, about a $2 million economic impact per year. I was like, are you crazy? I mean, these guys are eating tuna out of the back of a pickup truck and sleeping in their car, and they can't pull their pants up and put a belt on to save their lives. And that can't be. But you go out there with a clipboard and you start saying, who are you? Why are you here? Kind of the gold standard. Did you eat food here? Did you stay in a restaurant? And those economic impacts are real. The U.S. National Whitewater Center has 1 million visitors a year. And all of them, something like 20% of those folks will stay overnight. Almost all of them will eat in the restaurant or buy a beer, things like that. And so that venue internally makes about $20 to $22 million in an average year in gross revenues. And so it's a big economic driver for.
And they pump water there, and that's a lot of rafting traffic and that kind of thing.
What is for the recirculating courses? And I know there's a lot of factors to go into this, but like, what's the range for hourly cost to run one of those things?
Per channel, it differs depending on your power rates, and especially like in Europe, where power might be a little more powerful than, or a little more costly than here. But in general, you're looking at probably about $400 to $600 an hour, depending on where you're at for that. And so it's a lot of money for you and me and a bunch of kayakers to pay. And when you factor in the rafting, it's much, much more affordable. And you compare that to what you would pay to bus those people back up, for example, or the logistics of having a base and busing people to the put in and taking them from the takeout and feeding them separately. And your average rafting facility, and I realize a lot of them with outposts have gotten better at this, but people go home and eat on the way home, or they go to bars in town separate from your facility. And so what these whitewater parks do is create an all-day adventure. So you're not just rafting, if you look at the websites, you're also on climbing walls, and you're zip lining, and your obstacle courses in the woods and canopy tours. And so it starts to become an all-day adventure for people like a theme park. And in that context, it's profitable.
How many people do you turn away every year for, like, municipalities do you turn away saying, no, we just don't have time, or you're not the right place? Or
I would say we try and vet it a lot in the early conversations, but I would say that probably 15% of our projects, we're saying you can't do it in the river that you have. And usually they self-sort before they get to us. If you're looking out at the Mississippi River and it's dead flat in your front yard, nobody's thinking that you're going to build a whitewater park on that. And so it's pretty seldom that we get to town and the result of that is that there's nothing that's possible. It's very common that we go to town and the place that they want the whitewater park, we're saying that's not super feasible, try a different tributary or try a different stretch of the river. And this is more constructible or permittable or any of those things.
So how many, between you and the three or so total companies doing this, how many parks are getting built every year right now?
I would say that probably somewhere between 3 and 7 or so parks occur in America every year.
So here's the question. This is where it's all coming to, is how come we don't have 50 million new kayakers from 20 years ago? You'd think this would be creating, a whole bunch of new participants in this sport, but it doesn't seem to be happening.
Yeah,
it's usually the same 60 people going to all these courses.
Yeah. And to some extent, every whitewater park needs events, right? And so to some extent, what you're looking at in those big events is the road show showing up in town. So in Colorado, every year there's 6 or 7 events, and everybody's coming to town and going to the same 6 or 7 events and then going home. And part of that's the regular group. Some of those are new people every time, and so that's different economic impact. It was actually devastating when Mr. Geltman here in the North Fork race started pulling people away to go to Idaho, and we stopped getting the Jacksons and a lot of folks like that were high end because they were going to that event instead and getting beat by Lewis. And so at the end of the day, there is a lot of and we don't see this from our end of the show, but there's a lot of folks that are coming in and tubing late season, because Colorado, where a lot of those parks are, big runoff and then low water the rest of the year. So we're getting tubers and beginning kayakers and things like that maybe aren't on your radar, but that live and kind of play in that park that's there nearby.
Yeah, I know in the industry, every year or 2 years, we have a new organization trying to promote kayaking and get more people involved. And artificial courses seem to be a constant topic of conversation, like as if they don't exist, or if we just built more artificial courses, this problem would be taken care of itself. But doesn't seem to be lack of courses, you know what I mean? Or that issue is being addressed pretty regularly, it sounds like.
I think you would see it different if you spent a season in Colorado where we're kind of at full capacity for events now, because the runoff season is so short. Certainly now, Montgomery is bidding, for example, to try and host the 2024 Olympic team trials. And at the same time, traditionally, it was always at Charlotte, and then they built Oklahoma City, and they just made it 2 events, one at Charlotte, one in Oklahoma City. Well, now there's 2 events and 3 parks, and that city is putting forward a ton of money to try and win the bid. They're actually paying the American Canoe Association to try and win the bid to host that race. And so that's actually a really positive thing. And if you go back, as you know, because you used to sponsor a series with IR, not too long ago, industry was actually driving those events, right? There was big sponsorship for an Akoi rodeo or a rodeo series back then. And that sort of went away when you started to see a lot of these companies amalgamating.
Hemorrhage money would be the word you're looking for.
That too, right?
Yeah. I gotta say, it's pretty awesome to hear that there's 3 places competing to have Olympic trials after some pretty low years there where it was USA Canoe Kayak essentially like begging the TVA for water to turn on the course at the Ecoe and like having to move the race to, South Bend or something. It's like, it's pretty nice to hear that there's a little more vibrancy there.
Yeah.
I have 2 projects to pitch you, Shipley.
Okay.
One, how about like a big artificial whitewater course as a diversion around one of the Columbia River dams here in our neck of the woods, like something like Bratislava style. I feel like we have all of these enormous hydropower dams. The Columbia is averaging like 250,000 CFS. Each one of these dams have 60 or 100 feet of gradient. We could pull off 1,000 CFS. Nobody would ever miss it. We could build the best course. What do you think?
I would do that in a second. And one of the things that we're super conscious of going forward is finding parks that are carbon neutral, right? Something where we're providing a benefit. And as you know, out there's a big push to get salmon up the rivers, and they're not really finding their way up fish ladders and things like that. And so having an avenue, even if it's part of the day, that is commercially viable for those dams to pay back the power that they lost, and at the same time providing this recreation, I think that would be huge. And so we've looked at a couple of those. The salmon are also a hindrance, right? Because it's hard to get those permits, and it's hard to get somebody like the Army Corps of Engineers to start to think about new ways to do things in that context of litigation and things like that. What we need is an environmental lawyer on our side.
Yeah. Recreation, not red tape, Lewis. How's that going?
Cross paths with any? I don't know. I think it's viable. If somebody wants to sink like 20 or 30 years of their life into trying to figure this out, I bet we could do it.
Yes, I think it is viable. And that example project is going to start to, because it's cheaper than taking a dam out, for example, right? So it's going to start to, if it shows a benefit, really start to drive that.
The other one I want to pitch you on is what do we have to do to turn?
Can you phrase it exactly the way you phrased it to me before the show? Go ahead.
I asked Weld who we had to give an HJ to turn Rattlesnake, which is just like a little class 2 bedrock drop right below Hewsome on the way salmon, into a summer flow play spot. It seems like so doable.
This is the one after the pool where it necks down again.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty doable, I think. Yeah. So
how much money do we need, and how many years of trying to wrangle Forest Service permits?
I assume that's all privately owned land, and so you need land access is a big one. The permits are fairly straightforward there, I would imagine, because the waterfall is the next thing up. So one of the things we're always challenged with is, are you taking away the connectivity for some species on that river? And that's obviously a hot topic, since people spend a lot of time and money making sure there was connectivity on that river.
Yes.
But when you're up against a waterfall like that, it's pretty easy to say, it's easier to get up this than that. And that would be pretty doable, I would think. And so initial studies for us to come in, do a concept, talk to some permit folks and stuff, that's about a $15,000 lift. And then after that, we could give a cost estimate for what it is. But these things, like bridges, are much more expensive if it's wide. That bridge across the White Salmon is a lot cheaper than the bridge across the Columbia, right? Exponentially so. And so same thing for us. With a narrow river like that, you can make something pretty easy, I think.
I think Geltman's specifically looking for the person to give the HJ to, though. If I want to,
Scott, right?
It's not it. Yeah.
Verify that.
I will say that there is a scene that pops up around these whitewater parks, especially, in places where they don't have any whitewater. Like there's a scene in Columbus, Georgia. There's like a scene.
I've been to that scene, by the way. Can I tell you, I was there this past year. It seriously looks like the Teva game circa 1999. It's the same people, the same RVs, the same boats. Well, that's Stephen Wright. It's Clay Wright. It's EJ as his trailer there. It's exactly. I thought Dan Gavir was going to show up, or Keith Lyles. It was. Yeah. It was amazing. It was seriously a time machine. In a
yellow rosy sunglasses everywhere.
Exactly.
I got to give it a little more credit than that.
I'm just discrediting it. It was just a frigging time machine. I was like, oh my god, it's the Teva Mountain Games. This is insane.
I love it.
There's a scene in Charlotte now. There's going to be I guarantee that Montgomery is going to have like a scene where there was no whitewater ever before.
It was funny when we built Charlotte that you were looking at a bunch of folks in either a NASCAR, Jeff Gordon t-shirt or else 3-piece suits that were bankers. And there was not a kayak on a car in that town. When you go down there now, my grandparents were railroaders, and we would go to their place and we would do everything at the country club, right? Go to the country club for dinner, go there for a Christmas party. We'd go play hit balls or do a round of golf. Charlotte has become that. I mean, it's the place people walk their dogs. It's the place people climb. It's where they bike. It's where they jog. There are tons of people that go in and out of there every day just to be in the outdoors, even though they live in the city. And that is awesome. And the best example I give is that, in some ways it's a theme park for outdoor sports, but in other ways it's this lifestyle center. And somebody just started doing yoga at a kind of crossroads in the path there. And there's something like 600 people a weekend now that come in for free and do yoga in the woods in the summer. And it's that clubhouse, right? It's become, for this new generation of kind of active youth, a place where they can go be active every day. And people are having meetings in the, if you look around in the restaurant, people are bringing in clients and talking to them and things like that, including us. And so it's something that's really positive in that way, because it's kind of a healthy, active outdoor lifestyle for them, right?
All right, I got 2 things for you. Where are we at on the Asheville play wave, the Woodfin wave?
We are waiting on one approval, and the rest are all set up to fall like dominoes. We're out to bid for construction. And so we'll have a contractor selected before that final domino falls. And when that happens, we'll start construction, I think probably in February. Well, we'll start construction. We'll be able to start construction in the right window, which I think is summertime, but we'll be able to start construction with all those things in place by probably February, I would think.
Can you say where the one approval's at?
It's just a finding of no impact that they're looking for, that comes in from, you need that for the 404 permit. You need that for the CLOMR that we're doing, the floodplain development permit that we're doing. And so those 2 things are just waiting for that last agency to sign off on it.
I'm so optimistic, but I'm so pessimistic and skeptical that this is going to happen, because I have been hearing about this play park since like 1997. So
ironically, the thing we're waiting for, I think, is called a Fonzie. So when that comes in, then the dominoes start to fall and everything else is in place. And actually, usually the hard part's that CLOMR, but that part's done now. And so we're just waiting on that environmental thing. So
I can't wait. I hope that happens. Secondly, what's it called when let's say you want to build something in a commercial area, but you have to build a sidewalk? It's part of your permit. Like, you have to build that public. There's a term for this. I can't think of what it is. Does anybody have that on their head? Because I can't think of what it is. But I think there should be some way, Lewis, and you should figure this out in your recreation, not red tape, is, so for instance, they built a bridge across the French Broad right by the Blue Ridge Parkway for the new Raytheon factory here in Asheville. And when they built that, they built a play wave that was there from like 1,500 CFS up to like 6,000 CFS. And they built it in like a weekend. And it was just part of the construction that they put to make the bridge. Okay. And it was awesome. And like, people would go there and play and surf. There was actually 2 features that formed. But then they got the bridge done and they took all that out, and we're just left with pylons. So there needs to be some kind of thing, like if you're going to put pylons in a public waterway, you need to dedicate the money. I mean, Raytheon's got plenty of money. They need to dedicate some kind of thing to give back to the community, because you put those pylons in the river.
The don't tease me clause. Yeah, and actually it gets worse than that. And the one that, if Lewis is going to challenge me, I'll challenge him back. But the one that's really effective for sport is the Waterworks in Atlanta had a fantastic little section there for play wave, as well as slalom training and things like that, right in downtown Atlanta. And
am I going to challenge you about how fantastic the Waterworks was?
What happened was they came in and fixed that structure to make it more efficient for water intakes for the city, and they got rid of the whitewater facility, so it's no good anymore. And actually, there is a process to go back and sue them and force them to take that stakeholder into account. And they did object to it, but it was never considered and forced to happen. But that's been a huge impact to Atlanta, right? They don't have any place to train anymore or play boat or things in town, and it all comes from what you're saying. Somebody did a project without without sort of
yeah, it's
taking
almost
all the
like
stakeholders.
compensatory mitigation or something like that.
Something like that, where I mean they literally got the permits, built this bridge, and they had all the equipment there. They had all the materials. Everything was there to do it. Like a lot of the cost was there.
Right.
It could have, and it's like in that process of building those bridge pylons, they come to someone like Scott and are like, hey, we leave our equipment there for 3 months and we have this material. Is there anything we can put together? I mean, because they're already putting pylons in the river. It's not like,
yeah. And I mean, I think so much of it too is like getting through that permitting process, right? And you're like getting through like environmental analysis. And it's like if you could just add another component, it's not like a linear relationship. It's like if you're doing any environmental analysis, it's going to be a huge pain in the ass. And then if you add in just like one more element to it, it's just going to be like a tiny bit more of a pain in the ass. And so just sort of like looking for those opportunities to like piggyback recreation projects on top of other infrastructure projects
it's just amazing
where there's opportunity.
Yeah. So it's amazing how fast that all happened.
Yeah. So we do this thing. A lot of times they require a consultant like us to just factor into the process. And so tell us what the impacts are, tell us if this is safe or whatever. And for us, it's like 1% of our business model that we jump onto these studies and we go out and look at the site and write a little paragraph, and it doesn't turn into a whitewater park, but a lot of times it's a safety improvement or a planning improvement for a put in or stuff like that. But I had one about 16 months ago where we signed up for a project and they were saying, we got something, it's a federal project. I'm like, don't tell me anymore, put us on the project, let us know if we win. 12 months later, they call up and they're like, we want to onboard you on this project. And they sat me down with my office manager and they're like, okay, so there's a project. It's in Tennessee at a place called, and they literally do this, a whitewater park. And they start talking. They're like, the Whitewater Center burned down. They have to rebuild it. We need and they're these kind of people that just keep talking and won't stop to let you get a word in edgewise. And at some point, 15 minutes in, I text my guy, from my office, and I'm like, are they effing with us? Like, this is the Coe Whitewater Center where the building had burned down. And these guys were telling us all about how it was used at the Olympics. And,
you're like, I raced there.
Yeah. When we showed up on site, the Rangers like, hi, Scott. I've probably been there 1,000 times. So
that's hilarious. Well, should we get in the meat potatoes of this while we brought Scott on?
Yeah, let's do it.
Bring it on.
All right, give us some background here, Lewis, because you're a little more privy to everything yacht than I am.
Me? No, this is wild.
Jonathan.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a yacht or not, but so I heard.
Well, Dimple Rock was kind of
Dimple. So right, so I heard, I heard about this incident at Go Left the other day, and people have been talking how a rock had moved in there, and it made it a lot more dangerous. And you had mentioned Chelsea, your wife.
Catch Shipley up on that.
Shipley, you know about this?
You told me about it. Yeah.
Yeah. And a rock had moved in there, and Grace is saying Chelsea had mentioned she doesn't want to do a race there if there's a chance of someone drowning in that spot. And that also made me think about Dimple on the lower yacht, because I know that it's a class 3-4 river with one rapid in the middle of it. That's, I think, around 50% of the drownings that occur in that river have occurred at that one place where the rafts hit this rock and it flipped over and people swim out of this thing. And it's been talked about for years and years, making some change to Dimple Rock to make it safer. And I started thinking about, and to think about the lower yacht, because I don't know if it's possible or who would do that, or if it's just internet chatter, but if it's a real thing or not. But it did make me think about the ethics of modifying river bottoms. Are we in the same area as like bolting climbing routes and that kind of thing? And I know slippery slope is a term that gets thrown around to argue any point, but is there in fact a slippery slope here? If we authorize the DCNR or state park or whatever to fill in Dimple Rock, next time there's a drowning, will the lawyers for the family be like, well, River's End, has hurt people before too, and you guys have filled in this place, we need to take out the rock at River's End. And then it kind of goes from there. And how to, how does that work? And I've talked to a couple of people about this. It's, the Loriac is commercially run river, and Go Left is a class 5 rapid with a different set of expectations. I came into this conversation with a very passionate feeling you should not mess with the river bottom, period. But I've kind of, after talking to a bunch of people, my attitude's kind of at least getting more nuanced.
Well, first of all, could you fix Dimple Rock?
Yeah, that's the first question.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So physically, we can make safety improvements at Dimple Rock. That's clear.
And what would you do? Like, what would be the thing you would do to fix that?
There's different levels, and so just taking a step back on should we fix it or not, which I realize is a longer conversation. The thing to start with is it's not a Scott Shipley decision, right? My job is it physically possible to go in there and make a change or not? And if you hire me to do it, yes, I'll go in and do that unless I ethically have a problem with it. So
and do people call you about this exact situation often? Or I know in the Lower Yacht you're involved with this, but is this something you're involved with frequently, or?
The ethical choice to do a project or not comes up a lot. And so we had a project in New Zealand where they wanted to build a dam, and they wanted to mitigate building a dam by doing the whitewater park. And so and we went in and looked at that, and I don't know, it's a lot of money to fly somebody down to New Zealand and have them look at this project, and I felt really bad. But we got there and they explained, it was all secret until then, and they explained what they wanted to do. And my takeaway from that is, I'm not in that game, right? That's no matter how much money you have, I'm not going to help you dam a river. And much more likely to do what Lewis said, which is to help mitigate the impacts of an existing dam or something like that. So yes, we do make those choices. But in a case like this, I think it's up to those rafting companies. I think it's up to the people who manage the river and the people in that community to sort of come back and reach consensus on something. And that's where we come in and say, okay, if it's possible, we can do it, and we'll show you how. And in that case, a bunch of different options have been looked at, and they can be everything from pretty small, just filling in the hole at Dimple, to something bigger. One of the problems there is that the river it's not hard for you or me or anybody that's listening to this podcast, but the river, as you come down that left side, kind of naturally brings you out towards a rock called Pinball. And so one of two things happen. You either hit the pinball, or you kind of turn back and it start to move less to miss pinball. Well, then in either case, you bounce into this Dimple Rock, which is a bit of a flipping machine in the way it's shaped, right? And so there's a lot of different factors that make that more dangerous to the uninitiated, but not very exciting. Like go left is dangerous, but it is exciting, right? It's one of the big challenges of that river. In Dimple, for those of us who are into whitewater, if we didn't know which one Dimple was, we wouldn't remember it, I don't think, at the end of the river trip. It's not significant for a experienced paddler, but for those beginners, they remember it because a lot of them flip when they go in there. And so it's a unique situation in that sense.
Yeah,
go ahead, Grace.
My take on Dimple is I definitely understand the point of, where does it end once you get started? But like if you have a river, I mean, first of all, it's not like it's this pristine waterway that's never been touched. There's dams up and down it. It's released. There's parking lots. There's umpteen thousand people go through it commercially. There's tons of private people who go through it. It's and it's to me it's it's if it's going to have minimal impact, it's not going to change anything. It's just going to be a safer feature. To me, it's really, especially on a river like that, no different than sawing a bag log out of the way or any other kind of improvement on the river. Now, I have no idea if it will last, if it will stay there, like the engineering aspect of it, if it's a permanent fix or whatever. But I mean, it kind of it's not a wild and scenic river. It goes from one lake to another lake, and it's kind of a commercial zoo, in my opinion. I would fix it right up.
Do you think every state park in the country would be suddenly held to that standard? We're suddenly like Great Falls. Someone draws at Great Falls, and some lawyer somewhere would be like, well, Ohio Pile's taken action to make these things safer. You guys need to do the same thing, and we're suing you because you haven't.
I mean, there is that can of worms there, but I think that just because you do something one place, it becomes litigious everywhere. I mean,
I guess I hate like going down that sort of like liability concerns rabbit hole, because I think most of the time it's pretty overblown, but it does seem like, especially like something on the Lower Yacht, it's like, I think it's like, if you do that there, are you then by extension somewhat attesting to the safety of the rest of the river? It's like, by fixing that hazard, are you giving people the impression that you have now certified the rest of the place safe? And does that, just having that in the back of the mind for land managers, does that make them more liable to, close off access at high water? Or, I mean, it's already someplace like with, all the access restrictions that we've had forever and ever and ever at Ohio Pile. Like, is that just sort of feeding more of that kind of thing? It's, like, I feel like, to me, like, almost like the go left question is it's like an easier one for me, because I feel like what you're talking about is like, like you were saying, John, like, maybe it's more in the spirit of log removal. There's no government entity that's getting involved. It's really a decision for the people who are sort of like the senior leaders in that river community to make, and to sort of take action themselves. But once you start getting more official with it, it starts getting a little more weight.
Yeah.
I mean, I get
like a heavier conversation in a way.
Gigantic can of worms. I see where you're coming from there.
Well, but go left, the stakeholders there are pretty much whitewater paddlers. No one else cares about the new rocket go left. And if paddlers go in there and whatever, system of hierarchy you have there on the green for people to go in and be like, this rock's coming out, like, I know here on the Little White, there's some decisions made, and actually I want to bring that up in a second. But in terms of Lower Yaak, I mean, it's a commercially run rafting river. And Scott and I were talking about this earlier, and I think he made a really good point about this, and he can illustrate that himself. But why do people, I mean, and obviously, if you take your family rafting and someone in your family drowns, that's not what you signed up for at all. Obviously, that's not the outcome you're looking for. But what's the nature of going rafting as opposed to going to an amusement park? And the idea of rafting is that the guardrails are taken off. I mean, that's why people want the thrill, Now, I realize drowning is not the thrill that they're looking for, but what is the nature of, how is whitewater rafting on the Lower Yaak different than going to Six Flags?
One of the points, and this is probably what you're alluding to, but one of the things I think about too is, I guess, a couple of things. The first thing we looked at was people die in the outdoors, right? And I don't want to sugarcoat that, right? If you go skiing, if you go rock climbing, there's some percentage of deaths that happen out there. And so we started to look at the Yaak when we first came on board. Are those deaths that you're seeing in line with other rivers? And even before we got to the other rivers, the thing we realized is there's something like 15 or 16 name drops on the Lower Yaak, and almost half the deaths that are documented are in Dimple. And so, clearly, statistically, it's a much more dangerous place than the rest of the river. And the other thing we started to look at is, how is this river used? I mean, the green is used in a certain way, or if I do an expedition on some river in British Columbia, it's used in a different way. But in this one, they're selling unguided raft trips to go down there, or people who don't know what they're doing, 4 to a raft or 6 to a raft, and they're sending them down this river. And to me, the allegory there, the comparison is campgrounds, right? We don't let everybody camp anywhere in a national park. You're put into campgrounds, and there's an expectation that's a safe place to camp, and you're all together, and the fires are in fire pits. And, if the weather turns bad, you can drive out. And so the uninitiated come in with the expectation they're going to drive out because all these things have been thought out, or they can go take a shower or use the bathroom responsibly. It's thought out for that user group that's there. And the Lower Yaak is that comparison, right? It's not the Upper Yaak. It's not something remote that's hard to get to. It's something where we're letting regular citizens get into rafts with a video for instruction and then go down this thing. And I think in that context, when you think about, can I change the river in certain places? It's a different conversation. And I think that community should be talking about it in that sense, not in the sense of what do the rest of us need for our enjoyment when we go out.
I didn't realize that you could just go rent a raft and get your folks and go down that river.
I think it's semi-guided, right? There's like people with you, herding you, right, and telling you what to do.
No, you can do unguided raft trips.
Okay.
You can just go to 4-man. Yeah. Okay. In the case of Lower Yaak, this is someone off the track, but like, who would even, like, how would you even get permission to change that rapid? Is it DCNR or the state park, or who would be or the Army Corps of Engineers? I mean, who would be the people that come and be like, yeah, we're changing it?
Well, and I guess the question is, who is it or who should it be, right? And to Lewis's point on a lot of these rivers, I think there should be a stakeholder group that helps make that decision, right? That people can give input and be frank, and as a community decide what's going to happen at that drop. And that's not uncommon for all the places that we work, right? That it's, again, it's not Scott showing up saying, we're changing the river tomorrow, good luck. And doing it, there's a community process that it goes through with public meetings and things like that. And so that river is managed. So the people who manage that river probably have a very big say in that. But I think that there are committees in place. Eric Martin, I think, has been on one of those committees where they do kind of help not only guide physically what happens there as far as put-ins and takeouts and all that, but also management-wise in terms of rafting policies and things like that.
What other rivers is there any other examples besides Dimple that come to mind that would fit the same kind of criteria, or is Dimple just really unusual?
I was at Nantahala at one point in time, and somebody came down and went over the falls and wedged their leg into that, what was a crack between the rocks. Just as they fell down the falls, their leg got stuck and they drowned, unfortunately, with the foot entrapment there. And when they went out to, it's one of the best places to get in trouble because there's so many experienced rescue people there. They rushed out, and the guy who went out to sort of get him out actually got his foot stuck. He was on a safety rope at the time, and so fine. But it took him a while to get his teva released, and they basically turned that river off and fixed it that day or that week. And so there's also a case on the Arkansas River where some changes were made due to a death, almost without permission. And so it has happened in the past. I think it's a fairly extreme case that people should think about, but 9 deaths is, if you were looking for a problem, you could point to there and say, this is the best way to keep more people alive on the Yacht, right?
It's interesting discussion for sure. And you have, one reason it's a lot different than, say, bolting routes on a cliff or that kind of thing is the river's constantly evolving. The rocks are always moving, every flood, big flood, the river's different. And so, is there a cleanup after each one? I don't know. And then where does it end once you do one? So,
yeah. I guess I really came to this conversation thinking we need to embrace the spirit of adventure, as a people. We need to have experiences where we're negotiating dangerous things, but like I said, I think after talking to a few people about it, my attitude's changing. What do you think, Elman?
Yeah, yes or no? I guess, I feel like Scott's points about just underscoring the importance of community involvement and all of it is the thing, it's I guess I feel like it should be a very rare thing as it is, but I think never is not the appropriate frequency for doing these taking these kinds of actions. I think rare is good, and approaching it cautiously and slowly and with a lot of community input is appropriate, but I think sometimes it probably is the right thing to do.
Yeah, especially on something as commercial as just the volume of people that are going down it. And now hearing that people are just jumping in a tube or in a raft and cruising down it. I don't know. It's not like they're skilled people.
And it's we do this as as kayakers, right? We pull wood out of rivers with some regularity, and it's sometimes it's to open up something that would otherwise be unrunnable, and sometimes it is just because it's dangerous. And it's wood's different than rock, and it's it's sort of a more ephemeral medium you're working in, but I think there's sort of a community ethic around it, and in in any given community, what's the right amount of wood to remove, when, how do you do it? But we do this stuff.
The big example to the negative is this guy on the Salt River, right? That the FBI was chasing down. It's maybe 1990. There was a difficult rapid on the Salt River in Arizona, and somebody, I think, dynamited actually the rock that made it hard to run that rapid. And
I remember that story.
The world's caught up with that now, right? We can all run bigger and harder rapids now, and maybe you wish that was there, but either way, that guy went to jail for it. So,
wow, I've never heard this story. Give me a quick quick summary of that.
It was kind of an interesting one, but that's it. I mean, this I think it's a 3 or 4 day trip, and in the middle there's a place where they, I think, traditionally roped the rafts down, and people walked around. It was some difficult section, and this guy went in and dynamited the rock out to make that easier to do. And the FBI was looking for him, and I think there was a whole kind of DB Cooper thing where the guy was sending pictures from different places while the FBI was looking. I don't know if I'm remembering this right or not, but it was in Outside Magazine a bunch. It was something that they'd latched onto as being out there. But
did it work?
I'd never run the river before then, so the only framework I have is Outside Magazine, and they weren't impressed with the guy, I don't think, but made a good story. So
yeah,
a couple kayakers went in and pulled that log jam out above Getting Busy 2 years ago.
Yeah,
it's kind of controversial. I mean, right? I mean, I remember hearing people weren't super pleased about that.
Yeah, no, I think it was a little controversial. I mean, somebody had drowned in that log jam, and it was, trying to find his body. And yeah, I mean, it's turned out for the best. I mean, it was a little suck your teeth a little bit when it happened, but it's been an improvement.
So I will say that we used to run the Cedar River near Seattle when I was growing up, a lot of weekends, and it was always kept clear of log jams. And the folks that manage that river have come back now, and they don't allow you to remove the log jams. So they have a fish habitat benefit, and there's a lot of nutrients in those logs. And a lot of the projects we work on that are river restoration, we're putting logs in on purpose to provide that habitat and that nutrient source. And so it's something that even the wood is a little bit controversial.
Yeah. Does it have to block the whole river? I mean, can you have a channel free of wood and then have wood all over the place? Or do you know?
When we put it in, we're pretty selective about where we put it. Unfortunately, it's also a really good way to prevent erosion in a bank, like on the outside of a bend or something, because it has some deflection as well as armoring characteristics. And it also promotes willows and things growing. But we're pretty careful about making sure, a lot of times that tuber that comes down then just goes over a whole series of logs with stuff tangled in the roots and stuff, and it can be a little hair raising. So we try and look for more appropriate places, but not everybody's that concerned about the recreation aspect, right?
Right. There was some like deliberate log placement like that on the section of Trout Creek that goes into the wind out here, like between upper and lower Trout after the dam came out there. And a lot of it was really sketchy. I mean, it was logs that were cabled to the riverbed, and the way they were, held to the bottom of the river, it put the wood in places where wood would not ordinarily hang up in a way that made you like not really see them until you're right on top of them. And it was sketchy. Like I think the science around like retaining woody debris in rivers is maybe like evolving a little bit, but I mean, I think that's definitely like a good reason for us as kayakers to be, to go in with a light hand when we undertake log removals, because it is I don't know, a little bit controversial for sure. But
I mean, the problem with the little white log jam was just a whole bunch of wood down into the river, right?
Yeah, generally, but it worked out.
Well, maybe not as controversial as I thought. I really was like, I felt pretty passionate about this. If you asked me a year ago or 6 months ago what I thought about this, but interesting.
I talked us off the ledge.
Yeah. Well, when you come up with the idea, it's a lot like making a comment on the internet. You're waiting for that barrage of like people to naysay you, and I think there's some of that out there. I actually ran the lower when I was out there last time, and just ran into some folks that had guided. They were river people, and was just talking to them about their day and their experience. And some of the things surprised me. They knew about some risks that related to the case that we were looking at. And then I told them kind of what I do and then what my thoughts were on this. They actually know, everybody knows the rules out there. So we had friends in common, but as soon as I brought it up, there was a little bit of debate, and then they like politely pulled over, and I went on downstream. It was clear that they didn't agree with the idea. And I was more trying to be a listener than a talker. But I think, again, when you get to that community, there's going to have to be a community-based process. But the other thing I think is that nothing will get done in this world if that's controversial if you don't reach consensus. And so just having that in place, to me, the example I give everybody is, what if there was just an undercut that was easy to, dipple is different because it's part of the feature of the rapid, but what if there was just an undercut that was dangerous, like the thing on the Nantahala, where it makes no difference to anybody that the bottom of the river has changed shape, but it's safer now? I think we would all say, do that. I mean, nobody will ever know. Just throw some. If we were there, we'd throw rocks in if our buddy died, right?
Well, that crack was probably created by the road going in or something. You know what I mean? It was probably created by people anyway. So
totally, yeah. And so I think there's some where all of us would agree, like right now, let's just fix this while we can, so nobody else dies here. And that goes all the way up to this go left thing, where you're like, man, am I making one of the most thrilling parts of this run, and maybe not death defying before, but certainly painful when you go left wrong and banged your elbows up or flipped over or something. Are we taking that away from people by making a change? Well, that's a really tough choice, right? And so,
I don't think
community is important.
I don't think anybody would ever be on board with that, but with that rock, there was a flood around November 20th last year, and people believe that's when it washed in there. And then, I don't know if it was all the boats that got cranked out of there and Z-dragged or whatever, but after the race, they did a lake drawdown and cranked it up to 200%, and then they cut it off, and that rock is moved. So it is out of play. So who knows exactly what happened there, but that rock is no longer in play. So
one of the interesting things in our world is that we've all fallen in love with this sport because, God shaped all these rivers, and with the mechanisms that are there's pools below big drops. There's, the things that we're all used to naturally happen naturally. And so case in point, unless we're grouting a rock in or something in one of our whitewater parks, the dangerous parts tend to sort themselves out through these natural processes. Otherwise, every rapid would be super dangerous, right?
No, that's super, super true. I was talking to Weld about that when we brought it up, like on 49 to Bridgeport, when that rock fell in and created that circulatron where there was a fatality last year. That rock ended up falling all the way in, and the rapid became much more forgiving again, so it's that.
My concern my concern with it doesn't have to do with kayakers coming in and filling in a rock on the Nantahala. It's more of an abstract thing where you have larger groups of non-paddler types deciding what's safe and what's not safe. You know what I mean? And they're deciding where 100%. To identify risk. They'll be like, we're going to ignore how many deaths occurred, people driving to the lower Yaak. We're going to focus on this and decide this is where we're going to tackle risk, and we're going to make that decision for you. That's the scary part, Yeah.
And we've seen
we
that,
don't
right?
need any more of that. No.
Yeah. Great Falls was illegal for years, right? That was some guy who doesn't kayak saying this is illegal and you guys aren't allowed to go there. Because of all of it, we all ran it in the half light, right? Same on the Yaak with the waterfall that's there. It's not allowed to run that, so you have to work around that. And so that's
if that risk is on the table, then I'm 100% out. Don't change anything. If they're just going to bring a level of bureaucracy, I'm just done. I'm out. Don't raft. Do something.
Yeah.
I mean, go ahead. I just think with the lower Yaak, there's a bunch of government groups involved with that, between the Army Corps and the state park and the DCNR and all that stuff. And there's just sort of an abstract fear that these larger groups will start making very big decisions about how recreation is going to occur in that entire river.
It's probably legit.
I think that's probably the genesis of a lot of the concern. But I'm sorry, go ahead. What are you going to say?
I was just going to change the subject. Are we good on this?
Yeah.
One last comment though, to just follow up on what John said. What I've found, because we spend a lot of time in the bureaucracy, and there's some unreasonable people in the bureaucracy when we're trying to get permits, or as you said, how long it takes to get permits for some of these things. We're not always dealing with reasonable people, but in this case, when there's a death involved and you're talking to those senior people with a lot of experience, what I've experienced is there's genuinely people genuinely want to do what's right, and they don't know what it is any more than we know living in that world. But I haven't had a conversation with somebody, who's at that higher level that's super unreasonable about stuff like this. I think they don't know what the right thing to do is. They haven't done anything by default because of the way liability works. But I think people are genuinely trying to find a solution a lot of times when you have a case like this that's dangerous.
Yeah. I think hopefully everybody wants what's best. Yeah. All right. Well, what else we got for Scott? Well, we got him on. We've taken up over an hour of your time. Are you getting ready to go to Hawaii? I heard, or
I am. Yeah, we're flying out on Sunday with the family. So looking forward to a Thanksgiving break.
Okay, pleasure. Thought we were gonna have a
And
whitewater
it's
park.
sad I can't bring my kayak on the plane. I've already checked.
Is real quick, is slalom dead in the US, or we should just throw in the towel?
I think slalom is about to have a big rebirth, and so I'm not throwing in the towel. And got a bunch of things in the works. And when they come to fruition, you guys can bring me back, and I'll tell you all about it.
Well, it'd certainly help to build a slalom course alongside one of the dams here. I'm just saying.
Bring me out. I'll do it. Yeah, that's the best kind of park.
All right.
All right, Scott. Okay. Well, thanks for coming on the Hammer Factor. This is your second visit.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me. This is fantastic. Good conversation to have too.
Yeah, wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, thanks, man. It's good to see you.
You too. Yeah, appreciate it, guys. Thanks.
All right. Late.
I don't know. It's a complicated issue. It'd be interesting. I'd love to see some listener mail. If anybody has an opinion on this,
I'd love to see some passionate opinions about this because I'm sure they're out there and I want to hear them because I'm not sure. I think I'm hearing only from one side right now, which is the pro nanny state view.
That's probably what we need to be doing to really kick off season 2 is just like kicking the hornet's nest a few times and getting everybody back to sending us emails.
I mean, Grace has a great show topic, which I think needs to be addressed. And that was you had a couple trans racers in the green race this year, which is a fascinating subject that
That's
I think
awesome.
deserves a conversation.
Yeah. Well, on Monday, we're going to have Emmylou Kronzer on. She's one of our trans female competitors.
Perfect.
And she was part of the rescue. And so we'll get her perspective on all that, rather than us talking about it. Yeah, I don't know. The whole river thing is just, I don't know. It's just dangerous. Rivers are just dangerous. Every river needs a disclaimer. It's dynamic. It's dangerous. Be careful. Practice a lot. Stay fit. I mean, I don't know. In a case like Dimple,
run regularly. Exercise regularly, eat right.
You still might die.
Yeah, still may not work out for you. It's unfortunate, but that's kind of the sport. I don't know. Lewis, do you want to save a policy update, or do you want to jump into one? We haven't heard from you in a long time. Where are my land and water conservation funds going? That's what I want to know.
Man, I feel like that's I'm trying to pull something out of the deep recesses of my brain. I feel like I had something relevant to talk about on that topic, but I can't remember what it would have been. I don't know, man. It's been a busy year.
You said work was beating you down. What's going on?
Well, I mean, on the topic of, you mentioned bolting a couple of times in the course of that conversation, and Department of Interior and the Forest Service both came out yesterday and today with new climbing management guidance around the placement and use of fixed anchors, particularly in wilderness, which is going to be pretty problematic. It's a huge deal for the climbers. Just make it much, much harder to place and replace bolts, many of which predate the Wilderness Act. And, it's going to be a thing. You're going to be hearing about it from us. And if you're, a member of Access Fund or American Alpine Club or Climb at all, you're going to be hearing it from those guys, but it's going to be a huge deal. And that's kind of what was stressing me out when we were getting on the call here earlier.
Where do you guys stand on this? What's your role in all this?
Our role is to support the climbers, but it's also,
and what do the climbers want?
The climbers want, basically, the climbers are super amenable to reasonable, process and management of bolting, right? It is something that should be done judiciously, overwhelmingly, most climbers are never going to place a bolt in their life, but, adding a ton of red tape around, placing and especially replacing bolts is like a legitimate safety concern. And it's also, stands in the way of developing new routes and places. But, from the perspective of like kind of, the rest of us who aren't climbers, the climbing community has been, they've been huge advocates for wilderness designations. And if, the Forest Service and the Park Service institute regulations that basically make it impossible to put in a bolt to rappel in a wilderness area, the climbers are not going to be able to support new wilderness. And like, if the climbers can't support wilderness, the mountain bikers can't support wilderness where there's mountain biking, we're not left with like a ton of geography where we're all going to be able to like come together and support wilderness. And like, the recreation community has been like, not to pat ourselves on the back too much, but we've been pretty pivotal in all of the new wilderness designations that have come to pass over the last like 10 years, certainly. And if we come to a place where kind of the team isn't able to pull together on this stuff anymore, it's going to be bad from a conservation perspective. So hopefully we can iron this out with these agencies.
Yeah, I've always said that the best way to get more wilderness is to get more people interested in being out there. And this sounds like it's something that kind of makes people uninterested. So
totally.
What's the problem with replacing bolts?
So I think basically there's like a couple of like pretty extreme wilderness organizations out there that are advocating for like a very, very strict, very, very literal interpretation of the Wilderness Act. And I think part of it is aversion to climbers. Part of it is just sort of ideological. And part of it is the idea that if they can say that, something that's the size of like a silver dollar is prohibited installation per the terms of the Wilderness Act, they're going to be able to use that precedent to go after like all sorts of things. But I think it's just like an incredibly short-sighted approach. And I think that the land management agencies are in a tough spot between, the lawyers who are maybe inclined towards this like hard out wilderness perspective and, the people who want to take kind of a bigger picture look at all of this.
Oh. Interesting.
But I don't know. Besides that, I mean, the Biden administration has done a ton of good stuff on conservation over the last year, like working on a bunch of big rulemakings that are going to make a pretty big difference from a conservation perspective. And we've been working on sort of encouraging them to incorporate recreation kind of into their thinking on this stuff a little more holistically and make sure that we're, using recreation as a way to support conservation and conservation to support recreation. But a lot of exciting stuff going on there. Congress, a little bit more of a mixed bag, but we've been, you mentioned that recreation, not red tape bill that's, it's gone through a lot of iterations. It's, pieces of that are now in this America's Outdoor Recreation Act package that's made a ton of progress on the Senate side. And the House is about to release a recreation package that's kind of analogous to that Senate bill that includes pieces of recreation, not red tape. It's going to be called the Explore Act. That's going to be out in the next week or so. So we've been, all these things that we've been talking about since we started doing this podcast, we're getting pretty close to closing out on all this.
So explain this to me. Like, I just read the news and it seems like House Representatives aren't doing anything right now besides fighting, and I mean, certainly on the majority side. How's this stuff going to move through Congress with that kind of environment?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's been our experience, like certainly a lot of this happened during the last administration where like, at the sort of front page of the New York Times level, everybody is at each other's throats and doing nothing. Mm-hmm. But like a lot of the times when big, difficult things are too contentious to make any progress on, there's an opportunity to like do some things that are, maybe a little less polarizing, and like recreation policy is often one of those. Like we're able to make good bipartisan progress on this. And like, there are a ton of members of Congress who are, not out screaming on Fox News or MSNBC or whatever, and are just kind of like have their heads down and are kind of doing their work and rolling their eyes and shrugging their shoulders at all the drama that's happening at the top or getting frustrated, but just looking for something productive to do. And sometimes we can make some headway in that environment. I mean, I'm not saying that it's like good that Congress is so dysfunctional on like some of the most important issues in society, but nevertheless, you can still make some headway on some things in those environments.
Get up there, rub some elbows, Lewis.
Yeah, man. It's a party.
All right. Well, I don't know how long we've been recording here. We've got another second half coming up with us. What do you think? That's probably one show, and we should divide it into two or come back right. To her here.
A two-part. Season 2, episode 1A and 1B. At some point down the road, we need to have a PFAS update too. Fluorocarbons have hit mainstream.
Yeah. So what's going on with that?
We don't have to get this right now, but I just want to put a pin in that.
Yeah. Put that up on the Trello notes.
Yeah. Our customers are starting to ask about it. Like it's hitting mainstream.
How bad is it for me to lick my dry suit?
I mean, I don't think it's any worse than a lot of things you're probably already doing. Like if you drink water, you're probably ingesting PFAS.
We're in such a soup of goop, dude. We're breathing goop. We're drinking goop. We're eating.
Yeah, right
goop.
there.
We're wearing goop.
Yeah.
God, I listened to this Huberman Labs podcast on just tap water the other day, and I'm just like, oh God, now I got to spend $300 on a filter. Anyway, all right. Yeah. Well, no rants.
I think there's some good news though. In terms of kayaking gear, I'm seeing some light at the end of the tunnel. Like I'm seeing a pathway forward for us as an industry where I wasn't so sure a year or so ago. So, but we can talk about this later.
Well, let's not get into it.
Yeah,
I'm assuming like alternative materials and fabrics.
A little bit. I just think there's more clarification going on, and yeah, we'll see.
We tried waxed cotton,
oiled cotton,
hemp. It's all going to come back to hemp.
It's going to come back to Burt Reynolds style, Farmer John wetsuits with like a beaver tail, like a wool sweater. By the way, which is exactly what I wore for like my first 5 years in a boat.
I think I did this to Keene for the first time with one of those.
Like a deliverance wetsuit.
I did not have a dry suit the first time I went there.
We gave Daniel our very first dry suit we ever made to take down the Keene.
I remember.
That poor guy. Oh my, I feel awful for that. I still have pictures of that. We had no clue what we were doing. I mean, not a clue.
I can't even tell any. I got stories to tell, but I'm not going to.
Thank you.
All right. Get ready for episode 2 coming up season 2, episode 1B coming up right now. Did you guys hear that? Recording in progress? Okay.
Yes.
All right. We're back with part 2 of season 2, episode 1, aka show 89. I think that's what we ended up with. I listened to a good bit of the show last week. We weren't we were a little rusty, but it wasn't too bad. What'd you guys think?
I felt rusty.
Oh, awkward. Lost it.
No, it was pretty good. I listened to it. Lewis, I got to press you on one thing.
Oh, dear.
So when you talk about the administration being good for the environment, what does that mean? Like, how does that to a normie? Like, explain it. Because like I see like Willow Project, I see like untold oil and gas drilling in the Gulf, I see Mountain Valley Pipeline, I see, I just see like wars and this and that, and
those are fair. Those are fair criticisms. I mean, I think for the oil and gas policy, like they're pretty hemmed in by the law, like what Congress has directed them to do. And like again, like I wish I had this stuff more at the tip of my fingers, but there were some legal decisions that like compelled them to offer new oil and gas lease sales, and like within the contours of what they're able to do, they're moving pretty expeditiously on a lot of things. Like, so there's new oil and gas leasing regs that came out this summer They're like, we commented on the proposed rule, so it's like in between proposed and final rule right now. And one of the things it does is it basically directs BLM when they're getting ready to offer areas up for lease to screen for recreation in the areas that are, potentially subject to leasing, and defer potential lease sales that would affect recreation. And, we talked with BLM about this a ton, but there's certainly an argument, like we've made the argument that the era of public lands, oil and gas leasing should be over. But because of some of the provisions that were in the Inflation Reduction Act that sort of tethered the agency's ability to offer new rights of way for transmission for developing renewable energy to oil and gas lease sales. Basically, if they want to approve new renewable energy development, they have to do a minimum amount of leasing. So their hands are like sort of tied, and they're just trying to meet the legal requirements, but at the same time build out renewable energy as thoughtfully and expeditiously as possible.
Someone needs to.
That would be one example.
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot of that in there, and I know that everybody's pushing and pulling, but I think someone needs to explain that to a normal person, because it seems like just super hypocritical, and I know there's like behind the scenes things to move us forward, but it's just, it's when I
I think that's like kind of some of my frustration on like just sort of the discourse around the Biden administration in general. Is it's like they're like, honestly, it's like they're not living up to like anybody's fantasies, but that's not the real world. It's like they're constrained by the law in terms of what they can do, and like they're doing it, and like they're handed some pretty tough situations, and they're handling them pretty well. Like, I don't want to like go off the rails on this stuff too much, but like, like the situation in Ukraine, it's like, it's fucking bad, but at the same time, the government of Ukraine still stands. We haven't had a nuclear war with Russia. Like, maybe that's the best outcome that's possible right now, and like the same thing with the economy. It's like, we haven't gone into a recession yet. Inflation's going down. Nobody's like skipping around the maypole about things, but it seems like they took a pretty tough situation and are handling it like within the bounds of what's right now. Yeah, it's like within the bounds of like what's possible. They're doing a pretty good job,
Yeah.
And it's like, I think everybody like on both sides, just like, you see it with the Republicans in Congress right now, where like they're just, the House, their aspirations to like radically cut spending are, butting up against reality. And it's like, it's the same for, people on the Democratic side, where it's like, we have these real aspirations around environmental protection or whatever it might be. And like, you can't snap your fingers and make things the way you want overnight. And that's like, we all have to work together and compromise. And like within the bounds of that universe, I think the Biden administration is doing pretty good.
All right, I can snap my fingers. And change the subject here. So we have in the waiting room right now, we've got Emmylou Kronzer, we've got Evan Dyer, and Pete Frazier. Pretty soon we'll have Robbie Gilson. He said he's stuck in traffic on Interstate 26. If you live in this area, you're sympathetic to that. But these guys were involved in a dramatic rescue of Evan. I don't want to get too deep into it, but there was a dramatic rescue that happened at Go Left, and I'm going to get these guys in here right now, and we'll go from there.
Well, are you wearing a Braves hat?
Oh no, where did Pete go?
No, it's a hat from Bellingham.
Something I haven't heard of because I'm not cool enough.
We're talking about bars in Bellingham. We'll be with you guys in a second.
Hello.
All right, there we go. All right, we've got Pete Frazier on the line. We've got Emmylou Kronzer on the line. We've got Evan Dyer on the line. Join us. Robbie Gilson's going to be here in a little bit. we're here to talk about a pretty dramatic rescue that took place on Go Left at the Friday before the race. I think there's a lot of stuff that can be learned here. And yeah, welcome to the show, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Happy to be here.
For sure. Yeah. Happy to share it. It was a crazy day, so happy to share it all.
Yeah. I'm really interested to get your perspective, Evan, for sure. And you, Pete. So do you guys know each other?
No. Yeah.
No clue. We actually grew up kind of in the similar area in Georgia. Went to high school like maybe 30 minutes apart, which is cool. But no, I had no clue who Pete was before that day.
Okay. So you guys just met up on the river, like at the takeout, and like, hey, let's get a lap in. How'd the day start?
We didn't put on together. I was with another crew, and honestly, I've honestly never met Pete in person. I guess after the whole incident, honestly, I didn't really know who exactly grabbed me, and later after it, I texted some people, was able to find out who that was, and it was Pete. We never met.
Okay, before we get too deep into this, Pete, since you were there and you were conscious the whole time, can you kind of set the scene of how everything went down, just kind of starting from shuttle that day?
Okay. So yeah, I was up at the put-in with my crew and last practice lap, and most people I was paddling with, they were like, we're gonna take it chill for our last lap and just make our way down. And I was like, I'm gonna do a top to bottom race lap. So I was like, we'll catch you at the bottom. And so at Frankenstein's, I took off and I was paddling down, and I actually get to go left, and I mess up and go left, and I end up snapping my paddle in half. And so snapping my paddle, then I pull over on the right in the eddy, bottom right on the log, and I get out of my boat, and I don't have a breakdown with me, but somebody else in my crew up above does have a breakdown. So I was like, I'll just wait here until they come down. And then as I was waiting there is when Evan came through, and so I was at the bottom right of the eddy, bottom river right, and watched him flat pin, and that's when I started to make my way around pretty much immediately, because I'm already standing on shore, scurrying around. And as I'm making my way around, I see Carl about to drop in, and I'm like trying to yell at him, trying to throw up the stop sign, but he ends up coming through the rapid and pretty much like boofs right on top of Evan's boat, like over his bow, and makes it through. And then he's down there, and like this is all happening as I'm like scurrying up around. And
could you see the boat in the drop at all, or is it completely submerged? Like, what's visible?
The only thing that's really visible is the top of his orange helmet, and his hands were up in the air. And then every once in a while, the water would surge to where you could kind of see his face. And we're thinking like maybe he's able to get a breath there, but also he might just be swallowing water there. So yeah, pretty much just top of his helmet and his hands kind of flailing in the air, kind of in like a field goal position,
But the boat's perpendicular to the current. I know some people don't know the rapid that well, but the boat, it's at the bottom of this drop. It's perpendicular to the current, right? It's the cockpit's facing upstream.
Yeah, it's like perpendicular with the current. And his bow is facing towards river left.
It's kind of like a clamshell rock that's sort of pinning him in there, right into the cockpit of the boat.
Yeah.
Is that right?
So Pete,
yeah.
Oh, sorry. So Pete,
no, you go ahead.
Real quick. So when you broke your paddle going through Go Left?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then you're in your boat on river right?
Yes.
River right eddy. Okay. So you're kind of you're in the far back eddy that when it gets higher, it recirculatrons and swirls. And how did you make your way from that eddy up to the drop?
So I was already out of my boat by the time Evan came through, and I just pretty much scurried across on the rocks all the way up, and like going across the sneak line and everything, and then climbing over to the boulder that's right next to the drop.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Evan, tell me about what was going on with you while that was happening.
I guess so. That's right before we go left. We were doing like a race lap down with two other of my friends. We split into like 3 sections. So right above go left actually was we ended our first section. I guess we all joined up on the river right eddy. Kind of took a quick breath. And then actually, I don't know, it was pretty weird. I looked at my one friend JR and was like, you know what, let's set some safety for this one. So he got out and went to the river right rock, right there on go left. And then
up high, the rock up high.
Yeah, up high.
Okay.
And so he got out, and then we're like, all right, let's go. And then we were gonna, set safety for him after. But yeah, I came through. I mean, came off, the rock that you boof off to, off the left right before go left, and just kind of, didn't hit that perfectly, but still coming with some speed and just immediately dropped right. And I was like, oh crap. And I boat angle left, but just a little too far right. And when I went off the drop, it just immediately, maybe got circled for a second, but my boat just locked.
So you kind of just missed your move right to the bottom.
Yeah, pretty much just dropped off the ledge and just sank. And I guess pretty much just got locked on that rock immediately. There was no moving. And immediately, try to get out of the kayak. I was just I knew exactly where I was, not really freaking out too bad. I was like, all right, I'm just gonna get out of here. We're going to be okay. And I don't know what's going on. My legs would not come out of that thing. Not really sure what happened, if my feet were, pushed past the bulkhead or something, or the boat actually got stuck and bent around the rock when I was still in it, but my legs were not coming out. And then, I was reaching up. Actually, at one point I had a rope in my hand, but I was pulling on it so hard, trying to get out, nothing would happen. So eventually let go of that to try some other things. I did get a couple breaths of air when it did surge. So I would reach up, get some air, but honestly, it was just I swallow half a gallon of water every time I did that. So I kind of stopped doing that. And then, I literally just remembered going out. That was my last thing I remember in that moment.
Did you ever get your hands on your spray skirt? Could you pull your skirt?
I think I did. It was pretty I feel like I did everything to get out of it. It was pretty chaotic in there. So honestly, it's kind of, the whole minute or whatever that I was still awake was kind of a blur, to be honest. So
yeah, I'm sure it
was your line at the beginning, were you, I'm guessing you've run this many, many times, were you immediately this has gone catastrophically wrong, or were you this is a little mistake and I'm just gonna kind of shoot through there
yeah, honestly funky? Definitely wasn't the best line I've ever had. Came through there, I was like, oh, this is probably not optimal, but to be honest, not the worst line I've ever had through there.
Coming off the lip, you're little off, not calamity. Yeah,
going through the slot, it wasn't I was all right, we still got this. I feel like I took the right stroke. And then, I just did not get far. I came through, usually, you glide, get left. There was no skip. It was just immediately right.
What boat were you in?
12R Brana.
And so now Pete, he's underwater. What's happening with you? Is JR involved? Kind of get as much detail as you can at this rescue, because this is a very pivotal thing that happened here. This was a life-saving event, and I want to hear as much detail as you can give us.
So one thing, it's until now I didn't know actually where JR came from, kind of thing. So it's cool that you guys were setting safety on that one, because I just remember he was there, but I didn't know if he had already ran the drop or if he had just climbed down from the top. And yeah, so we're up there. JR had thrown his rope, and I had come up there and uncoiled about 15 feet of rope or so from my bag, threw that in one time, and then after JR's toss, and then I think JR had pulled his rope, maybe tossed his one more time too. So I think I would say a total of 3 rope tosses trying to get there. And I remember my toss landed right in between his head and his left hand, like perfect toss. But it was like, we were thinking either he couldn't feel the rope or it was too turbulent or something, or if he's unconscious at that point, who knows? But, and then, very apparent, like very quickly, we realized that he wasn't going to be able to get out. So it was like pretty quickly, I turned to JR. I was like, do you have a carabiner on you? And then, like, as I said that, though, I was just kind of grabbing mine out of my PFD. And we immediately, like, I grabbed my carabiner and I actually had webbing already on my carabiner. So it was my carabiner webbing. I clipped that in, and then he took my rope and tied it to the webbing. It just, I don't know why we kept the webbing on there. It's just kind of, we were moving pretty quickly there. And to be honest, we were like slightly panicked at this point for sure. So JR is tying the knot to my webbing, and I remember like being like, is it tied? Is it tied? And he's like, give me one more second. And then as soon as he was like, all right, it's tied, that's when I jumped off the rock, and as I can only see his helmet, but you know, I'm thinking is like, I'm going hands straight to the lapels of the PFD.
Which rock did you jump off of?
The river right boulder, the one that's like touching the flow.
Where the safety guys set up, where we set
yeah,
up
exactly, right where the safety guys set up in the race. Yeah, exactly that one. Yeah, and just jump in, grab onto his PFD immediately, and then I have my feet either on his cockpit rim or on maybe the boulder, but I think it was on his kayak. And I remember pulling him and being surprised that with me yanking on him immediately, he didn't come out. And so it's like, wow, he's really in there. And I start like pulling him towards river left, even though I'm looking upstream. So it's my right. I'm trying to pull him that way. I'm trying to pull him towards river right. And I don't know exactly how long, but I would say maybe like 6 to 8 seconds or so, maybe, of me pulling on him. And I even remember, like, as I'm pulling on him, like my feet slipping off at one point and having my hands on lapels, like almost pulling myself back up onto him. And then I eventually pull him out of his kayak, and we flush it down the right slot into the pool below. And his helmet is at this point like over his face, kind of thing, like covering his face. And I remember trying to unbuckle his helmet, but it was so tight I couldn't unbuckle it. So I ended up just grabbing the back of his helmet and kind of just pulling it all the way forwards off his face. Yeah.
And so you're floating in the water, and JR has a hold of the rope at this point, and you've washed through go left?
Correct. Yeah, we were in the pool. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And
right.
Do you want me to keep going, or?
I'm going to hold you up here. So, Emmylou, are you involved at this point?
Yeah. So, this is like when I jump in. So, like, to go back just a second, like I come up on the rapid and Evan is up top, and you know his buddy JR went to go set safety, and Evan drops, and then we're hanging out up top still waiting our turn to go through, and his buddy's like, he's in there. And so at that point I just was like, all right, well, I'm going to go down. So I snuck down the go left sneak and get in the eddy. And I am in the right eddy, but there was a couple people in the right eddy. So I was like, I'm going to go hop out left to see, just in case if he flushes out there. And then, yeah, Pete hops in and tugs him out. And then as soon as they popped out and we're going to the right side, I paddled super hard over to river right eddy and got out on the log. And then that's when I think Pete was let go, wasn't able to still hold on to Evan. And so at that point I jumped into the water, and Evan was floating face down, not moving or anything. So I flipped him onto his back and pulled him over to shore. And then Carl, who I'm blanking on Carl's last name right at this point,
Anderson.
but
Carl Anderson.
And Carl Anderson was right there on the shore, and I'm swimming, and I kind of hand him to Carl, and Carl and I put him up on the bank right there just before the log. So we're like on some pretty slippery slope, and we're yelling and trying to see if we can get a response from Evan, and obviously not getting anything at that point. And so that's when Carl is like, well, we gotta do CPR. This is what we gotta do. And so we honestly, like, we're so flushed at this point that we didn't even check for a pulse right away. We just kind of assumed, and this was one thing that Carl and I have talked about, like, we think that was the circumstance, that he didn't have a pulse, but we didn't check. I mean, he'd been in the water for a few minutes at this point. And so we knew at the very least that we needed to do some rescue breaths to get whatever water was in his lungs out. And so we're fumbling to get the life jacket off. There was me and another kid who was not really involved for much, but was trying to get the life jacket off, and he's fumbling, and I'm just like, move your hands, I'm cutting it. And cut off the PFD. And then that's when Carl was like, all right, I'm going to compressions. And I was like, all right, well, let me know when you get 30, and I'm going to do some rescue breaths. And Carl gets through the first round of compressions, and I go to do rescue breaths, and there's not much movement in the chest at all. And Evan's jaw was locked up. Essentially, like, the body's shutting down, and so the muscles are tensing, and so I couldn't fully open his airway on the first round. So Carl does another round of compressions, and after that, I pry open Evan's jaw, and we tilt his head back, and that's when the second round was, when the first, like, solid set of breaths worked, and we saw his chest rise with the breath and fall, and did another round of compressions. And I think we did about a total of 5. Carl did the first 3 rounds of compressions, and I did the first 3 rounds of breaths. And then we switched at that, and I was doing compressions. I think we did 4 total, actually. And on the 4th round, when I did compressions and Carl gave 2 breaths, we started to see some blinking. And we knew that we had Evan back. Then after that, it was just slow things down, take some breaths.
So Pete, when you had a hold of Evan, were you struggling to get him to shore? Like, how did you get over? I mean, it seems pretty complicated to swim over. I guess without Amy Lou in the boat, you couldn't have got. How did you get him to River Right? How did that exactly happen?
So we pretty much immediately flushed into the eddy, luckily. And then while in the eddy, I remember, like, we're kind of going around, and I'm like probably 3 or 4 feet deep in the water, or maybe even deeper, but I know my feet are, like, touching the rocks there, and I'm trying to, like, just pull him up there, but I didn't have enough grip on my, like, I was wearing good shoes and everything, but I just, like, in the water, I remember sliding off that shelf. And I remember kind of at that moment sliding off is when I, like, really started to feel like a little helpless, like a little, like, next level panic hit right there too. And I think after sliding off there, that's when I guess Lou and or Carl hopped in and kind of helped me get him there too. And we ended up having another guy, Liam, who was on shore, and he ended up throwing a rope into the eddy to, I'm not sure who grabbed onto that while holding onto Evan.
That's right.
Yeah. So it was all hands on deck at that point.
Yeah.
And Evan, back to you. When did you come to? What's the next thing you remember?
I remember, I mean, it was weird, but, like, I do remember, like, it was almost like sleep paralysis. I mean, I I don't think I've ever had it, but like what I could only imagine was like I was kind of dreaming. Just was like I couldn't open my eyes. It was just like a weird dream I was having, probably, I don't know, a minute or so. And I was just like, what is going on? Can't open my eyes, can't move anything. But like something was going on inside my head. Like I guess that was probably when, when I started blinking and stuff, that probably started happening. And then, all of a sudden I opened my eyes and Carl and Emmy Lou were right there. And I was, felt like weirdest feeling I've ever felt before. But it was, like a minute of dreaming, and then open my eyes and they're all right there in front of me.
That's just amazing. That is, hats off to all of you guys right there. It's so good that it was a positive ending on this whole thing. And so, Robbie, you and Robbie joined in late. He was stuck on I-26 traffic, as you can imagine. Robbie, we're setting up everything for the live show. We've got one little place where we've got radio communications. One of, I guess, the kids that you were talking about, Pete, who was there, or maybe Lou, you were talking about that, was there for a brief second, came down, said there was somebody unresponsive. Robbie, you jet set it up with a radio to talk and see what was going on so we could facilitate things up on top of the hill. What did you see when you first got there?
When I first got there, to start, our initial start with this was a paddler coming up to River Right at Gorilla, saying there's like a paddler trapped in their boat, still stuck in go left. And I just remember John pointing to me and going, "Robbie, go." And me running up the river right-hand side of the Narrows from Gorilla, which, if you don't know that terrain, is pretty hard to go get around. But just having been part of the camera crew in the past was like a path that I was familiar with. Getting up to the scene of the log at the base of like the river right eddy below go left, seeing basically I came to Carl and Emmy Lou and Pete and the whole crowd, Evan, right after Evan had come back. And upon first seeing Evan, I had never seen Evan in my life, and he looked like he was about 45 years old. When I saw him, he was pretty cyanotic, pretty obviously very out of it, completely spent.
Yeah. And then there was a series of events to get the EMT guys out there. And then how many people, Evan, did you walk up the hill? I missed the part of you getting up the hill. Did you just walk on out of there?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's kind of weird. Like, as I got farther and farther up, I felt better and better. When I woke up, I was like puking. Worst flu you've ever had. Just like couldn't move, shivering. Just like head was going crazy. Probably, you guys help me out. Maybe like 15 minutes of me kind of like sitting there, getting back to it.
Good 15 or 20. We were just like, at this point, like we have you, and so we need to figure something out to like get you to care. But at the same time, we were like, well, we know we're moving in the direction of stability. So yeah, we hung out for probably a good 15, 20 minutes. And just, you were kind of the leader of that. We were like, we need to move you, but at the same time, like, how are you feeling? And you were just telling us like, right now I cannot go. And so we would, kept taking vitals and would check back in. And I'd say after about 20 minutes or so, we started to make the move to get you walking out.
Yeah, then so once I got up, I mean, the first like 5 or 10 minutes was like definitely, holding on to everybody. Had to like scurry across the log. So I remember like people were in the water just in case I slipped. I got across the log, and I don't know, there's probably like 10 or 15 people that like helped me get up that hill. I mean, there was like both sides of me. I mean, I had like people, I was like had my arms around their shoulders, pulling me up there. That's like that getting out of there was pretty steep. So it was, making sure I wasn't slipping and stuff. And then, once we got to like better ground and there was like halfway of a trail, I was definitely kind of like moving myself along. Of course, with the help of everybody still. But yeah, it was every 5 minutes, honestly, I felt like a little better and better. I was able to drink some water. And by the time we got to the top, I was like, honestly, it was definitely like adrenaline kicking in. Didn't feel that bad. Like I was honestly like okay at that moment.
Amazing. And so how were you? Like how physically were you? I mean, I know that you were in the hospital the next day, and how was your body? How is everything?
So yeah, once I got in the ambulance, went to the hospital in Hendersonville, and then I was okay in the ambulance. Like they put heating pads on me and stuff. I think my temperature was like 94 degrees when they took my temperature. So I was like body temp was super low. So that was one thing they were worried about. But like vitals were good, like heart rate, like they're checking my heart, breathing and stuff. I was all good there. And then I think like an hour after I checked into the hospital is when I went like downhill, just like getting sick every 10 minutes, shivering, like could barely talk, just like felt like crap probably for till about the next morning at like 8 or 9 a.m. Like throughout the night was just getting sick.
Yeah.
And then
like getting sick isn't just throwing up.
Throwing up. I mean, there was like nothing to throw up. It was just like stomach bile. It was like crap. It was not fun. But then next day like noon, they like was able to eat something, felt a little better. The only thing they took X-rays of my lungs, and there was like not really much water in there, which was like really good sign. So because they were worried about like an infection, so they put some antibiotics in my IV, and then they took my blood test. That was the one thing they were worried about was my kidneys. There's stuff that's like the creatinine levels, which is like the kidneys are like the first organ that's affected when you go unconscious and like lose like your basically your heart. All your blood goes to your like heart and your lungs, I guess, and it kind of shuts off your other organs to keep you alive. And so I kind of went to like kidney failure on Saturday, and like I could feel it, like kidneys were definitely hurting. So the only thing they could really do was just like pump me with electrolytes, try to get fluids inside me. And then, so Saturday took a couple blood tests, and then Sunday they took another one, and it was like dramatically got better. So I was released from the hospital Sunday at like noon and was able to go home.
Sunday at noon, you were back at home.
Yeah. So yeah.
I was a part of a resuscitation on a river one time, and I remember in that case, and I think I told Robbie, I was like, bring all your warm clothes, because one of the big problems with that one was keeping the body temperature up. It's interesting that happened the same way. Man, so how are you guys now? Like all, Evan, Pete, Lou, like have you digested and processed all this?
Yeah. I'm feeling pretty good now. I think I had a hard weekend after that for sure. I mean, I blew my race run so hard. I just think I was in my head, and had a hard time focusing and making my moves, and yeah. So, but fortunately though, like it being the race weekend, I had so many people around that were just like able to talk to me and help me process the situation, and ultimately like our outcome was good, so I was like, the processing was pretty easy. Like Evan's still here, Evan's with us, and so it was like, I think it was a couple of days of weirdness of like, oh, that just happened, but ultimately I'm feeling good that everything worked out the way it did. And I think there was a lot of things that just played out right. Like I didn't know, Pete, that your paddle snapped and that's why you were there. Like that to me is like, that's wild. Like I have a hard time seeing coincidence in that, and yeah, it's just a wild situation, and it's awesome to know how it settled the way it did.
For me, it was like, no, it was definitely like in the hospital and stuff. It was still like so much adrenaline, trying to feel better. It was kind of a, didn't really feel like what just happened. It's kind of like the Monday, Tuesday. Once I got home with my family, that's when it like started to really hit with like how like close I really was like to dying. And like, I don't know, just being alone by myself at home. It was just like, it was hard, it was like, gosh, like what am I doing? Like I about just died. But they don't like, I was just, wow, like somebody was watching over me that day. Like for, to Pete to be right there, for Emmy Lou, for Carl, for, having JR up on that rock, like somebody was watching over me. I definitely got lucky, and, it was just like, can't thank y'all enough for, being there. Like Pete, you didn't even know who I was, and you jumped in. Like that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, that's a question, Pete. When you jumped in, I mean, how skeptical or dangerous was the situation you're jumping into? Like, did you feel like you could be jumping into your own death basically by doing that? Or did you feel pretty confident about landing on that boat and getting a foothold in there? It's been a long time since I've been on that raft, so I can't remember exactly how deep it is there.
Yeah, honestly, I had I had full confidence in my ability to be able to jump and land onto him. I wasn't terribly worried about my own health at that moment. Like that's not what was going through my head. And I
should you have been
just felt
in retrospect?
should have. Yeah, possibly. And I do know that I actually went down there like a week before when the water was off and looked at it and actually grabbed my friend's paddle out of there and everything like that, and literally crawled down off that rock, kind of into that same spot on the right side to get his paddle out. And so I'd seen the drop of that water, and but yeah, I felt confident that I was going to be able to grab onto his PFD and everything. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, when I was down in the eddy below, I was like, yeah, they're live bait set up, and I almost, I was wanted to be like, just know what you're getting into, right? Because jumping into that situation, if you don't know the rapid, right, like sideways flat pin and all the water is coming down, if you fall upstream, then you're pinned up against the boat, and the amount of force that's there, you can't get out of that really. And it's a risky jump, but at the same time, and I think Pete, obviously it sounds like you knew this, is if somebody didn't do it, Evan wasn't coming out. And so it was one of those things that needed to be done. And if you know how to set up a good anchor system, and it's rad to know that you had seen the water when it was off, so you knew what what to jump onto, because a missed jump there could be it for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've rolled up on some rescue situations before, in the past, that haven't gone as good as this one, and it's showing up 10-15 minutes after the accident or something, and it's just damn, kind of if I was there, would I have been able to help, or who knows, and stuff. And yeah, it was weird. It was just this is kind of felt like I didn't want to just watch him stay there, it was somebody's got to do it, so yeah. It wasn't I didn't turn to JR and was do you feel comfortable or anything like that. We didn't even discuss it. I just kind of took it upon myself, yeah, I'm gonna jump in there. I felt fully confident in the moment. So yeah,
that's amazing. Before I want to get into some key points, some key takeaways that for anybody who's listening to take with their own group, their own skill set on the river and whatnot. But I just got to say, from my perspective, I was on the radio with Robbie, and we were orchestra. There was only one little place where you could get signal out, and just hearing your progress and everything, it was super uplifting. When I got radio word you were in the ambulance, you were on your way, everything was going good, Evan, as good as it could be in that situation. But I will say, full disclosure here, when we got to the top of the hill, somehow we ended up with your helmet, and we watched the your helmet cam. And we kind of felt bad about doing it, but we had to watch it. But I got to say, man, it was just such a thing to watch that happen, and to kind of see Pete's hands and see him jerking on you, and then see the helmet cam floating in the river. And I mean, I was affected by the whole thing, so I can't imagine you guys got away without, some emotional being affected in some emotional way. So, just props to you for coming on the show and talking about it. It's basically what I'm getting at.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if like anybody can learn. I don't know. I hope somebody can, listen to this, learn something from it to prevent, something happening in the future. So.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Lou.
Oh yeah. Sorry. I think it's one of those things too, that it's like, I mean, just being like super informed about that rapid. And this is something too that I think a lot of the community has been talking about is like, we saw over 5 pins like that that week, so like Evan wasn't the only one. Evan was just the one that got held in the longest, right? And so like and I know that rock has since mysteriously moved, even though the water has been off, which I'm curious about. But yeah, there's a new rock in play at Go Left that, I mean, if you saw the pictures when the water was off with the rock, I mean, it's prime grabbing spot that if you flat pin, it's going to start folding your boat. And so, yeah, like knowing that and just like, knowing too, like the water level, 12, we're running 12 inches. And that's like one of the harder water levels, especially running hot left, which, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Evan, but you were running hot left, not traditional left line.
Hot left. Yep.
Of Go Left. Yeah. So, and that's like already a hard move on top of a hard water level. And yeah, I mean, like the big takeaways that I brought were just like setting safety is huge for that rapid. And then knowing too that there's a trail right there. I had no idea that there was a trail over there, which is wild. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking like, first of all, do you paddle with people who risk their lives to save you? Right. And that's the first thing. And the second thing is how's your CPR training? Are you up to date with your certs,
Yeah.
The thing I think about,
this is a dangerous sport we're in, for sure. I remember taking an avalanche course here a couple of years ago and just remarking on how after an avalanche, people are coming to rescue in a very stable situation and the action's over. You know what I mean? It's not that it's not life threatening, but the rescuers are relatively safe. But farthest thing from the truth in whitewater, I mean, a lot of these times you're going to put yourself in exactly the same situation that person who's stuck is in,
That's the thing I think about too, is just like, I think people who are kind of newer to the sport, especially, get very, very focused on sort of like rope work and the theory, but like so many times what leads to a good outcome is just like really quick, decisive action and physically putting your hands on the person who's in a bad situation and just like moving really, really, really quickly and purposefully to do that. And like, it's risky, but it seems like that is usually plan A,
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I think like a big takeaway that I had in a Swiftwater course was like, you don't spend, whoever's got the first idea, you go for it. And then you go for the next one and you go for the next one. In a situation like this, yeah, you don't have time to, like, oh, well, what about this option? Or what about this option? It's like, no, we got to get in. And I think that's exactly what Pete did. And that's the right thing to do, is like, he saw an option and there's no time to consult, cool. Is the knot tied in? Great. I'm going, this is our option right now. And then if that doesn't work, then we'll try something else. But especially, in like whitewater, when the airway is compromised, it is a matter of seconds, that count, and every second counts. And you got to just go with what first pops into your head.
Yeah. Well, my hat's certainly off to you guys. I got to tell you, so the things that happened there, JR got out and set safety. It's fortuitous that Pete was there. Because, something to realize is that one person setting safety there is not going to cut it.
Right.
So it's very fortuitous. There was a team there. Having the proper gear, just basically having ropes, beaners, all that kind of stuff. Knowing CPR, being able to, actively start compressions and whatever. It was when I talked to Carl, he's an EMT, worked on the ski slopes for a long period of time. And when I got on the radio with him, he was giving me all the vitals to relay up top. That's super important for those guys to get them there. And just obviously grab that bitch is always option number one, any rescue scenario. And then just the team, just having a team. Is there any other things you guys wish would have happened different? I mean, it seems to me like in that situation, this is as good as it could have went all around. A bunch of people who kind of didn't really know each other and the whole 9 yards coming together in that fashion. But is there anything you guys wish was different or anything? I mean, Pete, were you ever underwater when you jumped in there? I mean, I'm just going to say to anybody who doesn't know the green, where Pete jumped in and where Evan was pinned is the most savage place on the Green River. It is the most locked in, tightest, darkest corner on the river. So,
but no, my head was above water the entire time. Did not go underwater at all. I was downstream of him. Yeah. But I think.
Go, Robbie, jump right in there, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think another thing that's just imperative with the hands-on grab that bitch approach, and this is like preemptive, preventative, just as, I mean, in a similar level of importance of like understanding wilderness first aid and CPR, that sort of thing, is being really familiar with the territory in which you play. And what I mean with a river is going in and hiking into a river at no release or very low natural flow and learning what the textures of the different parts of rocks are in certain rapids. There are ways to get around where, not having familiarity with the side of the riverbank can add like seconds and potentially minutes in navigating to be where you need to be. And so if you're paddling hard whitewater, I think it's really important to hike into these gorges that we play in and spend our time, and that we know the bank about as well as the rapids themselves.
Yeah. Evan, did you ever get your bib?
Not.
I got a bib.
I don't know if I want it. I don't know. Might be a bad memory. Could be also a great memory. Like this day, all these people, saved my life, and definitely learned something from it. Like it's gonna change my whole life. That I think it was November 3rd. So
yeah.
Are you done kayaking now? Or are you just gonna be mostly like bass fishing or tennis?
Yeah, I'm probably gonna pick up bass fishing, weekend tournaments with Eric Jackson. But no, I mean, actually, so I taught kayaking at the Outdoor Center at University of Tennessee for 4 years, and a couple of my friends texted me last Wednesday, and they were like, "Hey, we know what just happened, but you want to come to just hang out for a second because I haven't seen him in a while," and they heard about the accident. So I actually went there after work for like an hour and jumped in my rock star, and it was definitely weird putting that skirt back on, getting in the water. Like that was weird, but got in and started playing around, and kind of within 15-20 minutes was definitely not really thinking much about it. It was playing, but honestly, I can only imagine the next time running a rapid. I have no idea what's going to go through my head. Definitely not quitting it though. Definitely going to change my mindset completely around though.
If you want to hop in a longboat, I got your 12R right outside the front door. So
I mean, you're the man.
You look like a creature craft or something.
Yeah. So no, thanks for doing that. Definitely, wanted to get that thing out of there. Definitely not leave that down there. But yeah, it's like my knees are like, that's the one thing that hurts. Is I don't know what happened when I got pulled out of that boat, but something happened to my legs because I'm still walking around with a limp. So
yeah, and that boat stayed in there until Tommy got it out, right?
Yeah.
That boat stayed locked in. I saw a picture of that boat.
Yeah, it was kind of my dad actually. It's kind of funny. So my dad and my little brothers came up for the race, but yeah, of course they got the call from the hospital, and it was the insurance lady was calling my dad. It was just like, hey, do you have your son's insurance? And my dad's like, what happened? She's like, I have no idea. My dad's like frantically panicking, trying to find out my insurance information. So then he got to the hospital and stuff. And then I convinced him the next day at the hospital. He was just like staring at me with my little brothers. I'm like, you guys got to get out of here. Like, you're going to go crazy. So he actually hiked. I was like, go watch the race. So they went down and watched the race. And that was, my dad told me, like, saw my boat and like grabbed my rope out of it. My water bottle was still sitting in the water bottle holder, which is kind of crazy. Like, just by the little, bungee cord. It's not even carabined in there. So that was up. He was like, yeah, seeing your boat was kind of, scary, like real life situation.
Yeah. It's crazy. Every boat that we pulled out of there that week looked the exact same.
Yeah. Wild.
And that rock is gone now, right?
Yeah, I think it bumped up to 200% and washed out of there or something.
So I think this is different. I see it came out before 200 is from what my understanding was.
It was like a microburst, maybe.
I think it was the water.
Yeah, maybe. I have my theories, but.
And so with the rock out, are you guys divined that it's back how it used to be? Was that in fact the issue?
I mean,
rock was definitely...
if you look at a lot of those boats, they were folding on that rock.
Did you see the picture of that rock and the boat stuck on it? There's a picture somewhere on social media. It's pretty clear to be the culprit.
Yeah.
I mean, there's always been like that meltdown potential there, but the boat is always loaded, springed out in some kind of weird ender type bloom out of there. It's never been where it just goes down and gets clawed in.
How big was the rock you guys were talking about?
I don't know. It was maybe
upper torso, probably like upper body
suitcase,
of like
and it was just kind of like sitting against the like main dividing rock underwater.
Like from the pictures, I mean, it was probably like 1.5 feet wide, maybe like 2 feet wide, kind of like sitting, like, pinning my boat. It was pretty much just like literally my boat was just like, I don't know, under it. Like, it was like a perfect wedge rock. It was weird.
Like a 500 or 600 pound upstream facing clamshell, like top of the iceberg of the rock. That's like what people were flat pinning on. But Go Left still has the sieve on the river right hand side, still has the potential to piton and or pin on the center rock. I mean, it's not safe. It's just a hell of a lot safer than it was without that fang rock. I mean, there was a fatality in 2018 there with it as it is right without the fang rock.
Yeah, the rapid
and that was safe. The same. Yeah, the same style pin too. That 2018 was a flat pin in the same direction and the boat folding and so I think what was just happening is you used to kind of like if you messed up and dropped a little bit right, you're like, well, you kind of got saved. Like, yeah, still getting flushed out in some way, but the rock was sticking into the left channel, so it made that like push out slot even narrower. And then when you're dropping in with a longboat, you've got that much more foot on there that's just getting grabbed. And so, I mean, people were just getting snagged left and right. And I mean, the same thing happened, like obviously a bunch happened the race weekend. And then there was another incident with a stinger that happened, I don't know, what was it, a month before the race or a couple months before the race on like a low water situation at about 6 inches, same hot left, boat folding, but the boat came out. So it's almost like, I think that as more people started to do it and more boats started to hit it, it started to come out more and more. And the rock started to move more and more as more boats got up against it and water then pushed on the boats.
Yeah, there's lots of theories. I also know some short boats that got pinned in there in a similar manner.
Yeah, too, so. Yeah, that Brap got in there too.
Grace, do you guys run that? Do you guys, like, does everybody just run that rapid every time, or do people sneak that when it's not race season? Like, I mean, like...
Every time.
You run it every time?
Every time, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean...
Here and there, it depends how I'm feeling. I kind of, when I hike down there, it's never like, oh, I'm running, the big three. It's kind of like, I'll feel it like it is. If I'm not feeling 110%, I'm sneaking. I mean, probably I'd say 75% of the time I run that river, I, just run the right. It's honestly, and I'm usually running it in like a, ripper, low key, like something, more of a fun boat. So I'm just playing around. But when it comes to race season, I'm definitely kind of more motivated to run it.
Yeah. Well, does anybody have anything they'd like to add to this discussion before we let you guys go, Robbie?
Yeah, I mean, another thing that really helped with this situation and scenario, like race day, like having radios, like how many times do you have radio correspondence with like the top of a gorge when you go kayaking? It's really changed my perspective of how often do I have some form of communicating with outside world or like search and rescue or EMS personnel. In the past, I've been like, oh, I have my spot device. I'm in like High Sierras overnight or something that makes sense. But on the green, I've been in a play boat with like probably minimal safety gear on me to like go down and have a play lap. But it's been a real like humbling eye opener for me of what's responsible for me and the people who I'm sharing the river with, and like what's responsible if shit really does go down, it goes down fast. And if you're in the deep gorge and you have no way of communicating that you're SOL, it's exponentially worse. So I since have bought a satellite messenger device and plan to have that with me whenever I'm kayaking.
Yeah, it was definitely a wild set of circumstances that kept everything together. I mean, you're right. Like, how often do you have like a full comm set up down in the Narrows? Like that. So
it is a good point about just like the way you take your local run. It's almost like the thing about most car accidents happening within a mile of home, and it's like if you don't how important it is to wear your seatbelt on like short trips, because that's most often where you are, and so like most often where there's going to be an accident. And it's kind of the same for like your home river, where you probably feel the most comfortable, but maybe there's a little bit of a false sense of security there.
Agreed.
For sure. I just say
I think a cool thing to note too. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Evan.
I'll just say pick who you paddle with. I mean, there's like Pete, Emmylou, Carl, JR. I mean, they're like, those are the four people that literally like saved my life. And like now when I put on the river, I'm gonna look around with who I'm like sitting next to at the put-in and make sure those are my people. Like, of course, I'm gonna jump in if they need me, but I'm also also halfway have to rely on them. So, don't go on the river if you're not feeling 100% confident with the people you're going with.
Well said, Evan.
That's very good advice.
Yeah.
And then we actually made the call to EMS on my iPhone with no service down in the gorge using the SOS function of iPhone, and I have AT&T, and we were actually able to make calls out to EMS. We could not receive calls, but then at one point I did get some signal. But like that feature does work, and I keep my iPhone in my PFD in a dry bag, and so we were just able to I handed it over to Christian Mullins, and she called out, and we were on the phone with EMS while compressions were happening. So just an important thing to note.
Yeah, and if you paddle the green and you're right there at go left, if you can get up about 60 feet off the river on either side of the river, you can get some cell phone service right there.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, amazing story. So happy that Evan, you're right here talking to us. I hope anybody who's listened to this got something out of it. Pete, Lou, you guys are amazing. And props to everybody involved. I guess we'll let you guys get on with your day, I got a couple other things I want to get with you about, Evan, but man, I certainly appreciate you guys coming on the show.
Oh, for sure. So and
thanks so much.
For whoever's listening, I mean, there was like 10 or 15 people that helped me out, and all of you, Robbie, Emmylou, Carl, Pete, JR, like thank you all like so much. I mean, there's really nothing I can do to pay you back for what happened that day. So
yeah, glad to be there. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah.
Thank you, John.
What the paddling community does for each other.
Yeah. Thank you, John.
We'll see you guys later.
All right.
Thank
Thanks,
y'all.
guys.
All right.
Thanks,
Yep.
everyone.
Oh man, always good to get a rescue story that goes right, but always heavy nonetheless.
See you, Robbie. Yeah, I mean, what a cascading set of events, for young Evan Dyer to be on the show talking to us. I hope that anybody listening can get some nuggets of advice. So true, Lewis, your home run, don't take it for granted, and just, what did we talk about? Have the right gear, be ready with a team to rescue. You're not going to be able to do the rescues all on your own. Act quickly with much conviction. Grab that bitch.
So much depends on someone who has the cojones to jump in and grab somebody. You know what I mean? God, so many rescues pivot on that single act of courage,
Yeah. And dude, where Pete jumped in, man, it is a not friendly spot. It's unfriendly. It's hard to get to. It's very powerful current. That guy.
Would you guys consider taking that rapid out of the race and make it a sneak?
If it continued the way it was, there's no way I would have raced through there. I wouldn't have put the race through there.
Right.
100% conviction on that. But there's been thousands of longboats go through that rapid over decades and decades, almost 3 decades. And
right.
A boat with some volume, anything can happen. And we do set ridiculous safety there, and our safety is set up to, the safety is to go in the river with a person. So, that's the way it happens. But
it is I don't know, it's notable too. I always thought about this, especially at NFC, but it was the lead up to the race is always the scariest part because it's,
for sure.
It's there's everybody is pretty on it about having safety at races these days, I would say. But when you're practicing, everybody's going fast. A lot of people aren't, you're not stopping. People tend to be doing solo laps and on their own program. And it can get loose.
Well, I'm just so proud of that crew who was just on the call there, for everything that happened there. It's just amazing.
Yeah. Having gear and CPR training really pays off, Yeah. Can save a life.
Yeah. Well, I hope anybody listening. Oh, go ahead.
No, I remember I was listening to Evan's part of the story and I was looking at Geltman and I could tell we were both thinking the same thing. Just, oh shit. Yeah. That's the worst, It's everything you've worried about your entire kayaking career unfolding before your eyes,
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, just when we watched the helmet cam at the top of the hill,
that's sombering.
It was
sobering, sombering.
Sobering. Just combine them. That's totally fine. Right. It was all too real. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But anyway, I hope somebody got something out of that. I'm sure that was not a comfortable conversation for Evan to have there, especially. And I just big hat tip to those guys. And so I think that kind of concludes season 2, episode 1, aka episode 89, unless you guys have something you'd like to add before we get into everyone's favorite part of the show, our rants and raves segment.
Do you have a rant or a rave, Geltman? Usually you come kind of flying and hot on these things.
I'm just going to rave about Pete. I'm going to rave about Pete Frazier jumping in there, grabbing him out of there. All those guys, I'm raving about all of them, but Pete jumping in there and grabbing him.
Yeah. I did know the guy.
Yeah.
I know that's probably, that's probably not that big of a factor, but still.
Yep. Lewis, I know you prepared something.
Weld first.
I don't know. I had this thing I want to talk about, but I don't want to come across I don't want this to sound the wrong way.
Oh, it's going to be perfect for the Hammer Factor. Let's hear it.
I'd like to call it a rant, but it's not really a rant. It's just sort of a sigh. Can we have a rant, rave, or a sigh?
Let's hear it.
So, and this is it's an industry thing, so maybe this is boring. I don't know. But there's another paddle sports trade group forming. Geltman, are you part of this at all? Have you heard anything about this, or Grace?
I've heard about it from you.
Oh, God. I don't even want to hear about it. All right, let's hear it.
It's the Paddle Sports Trade Coalition, right? And I've been kind of watching from the sidelines. And, these things form from time to time. In fact, Jeff Moog from Paddler Mag. You guys know Jeff? He's the writer he's been writing for a bunch of publications. But
no, Jeff,
yeah, that's right. He wrote this in Paddling Magazine where he mentioned that there's been a few of these and he listed them. And here's the synopsis of the different paddle sports organizations that have formed to presumably promote whitewater kayaking or paddling of some sort. So we have the Trade Association of Sea Kayaking, and that was around from 81 to 90. America Outdoors, which is actually still around, but it's mostly rafting now. Trade Association of Paddle Sports, that's 1990 to 2010. Professional Paddle Sports Association was 1979 to 2007. That was a pretty good run. Paddle Sports Industry Association, 2007 to 2010. The Outdoor Industry Association Paddle Advisory Council, there's a mouthful, 2010 to 2015. Paddle Sports Trade Coalition Part 1, so 2017. And now we're in Paddle Sports Trade Coalition Part 2, 2023. And then that's not to mention the other stuff, ACA, USACKT, USCA, whatever, American Rivers, American Whitewater. I think there's a paddle organization for pretty much every 10 paddlers.
I don't think you can lump like American Rivers and AW and ACA and that.
No, I realize it's a completely different things, but
you can lump ACA in there easy.
There's a whole slew of these paddle sports trade organizations. I just don't know if I understand what we're trying to do here. And I think they say they're trying to promote paddling and everything, but I'm not. And I think they're going to pay somebody to be in charge of this too, or raise money to pay somebody to do this.
Who's they?
Right. So a bunch of manufacturers got together in Bentonville, Arkansas, which is kind of a thing, right? If you're going to have an association for the outdoors, I guess Bentonville, aka Walmart, will host this for you. So they met down there. And from what I've just from the sidelines, I hear like retailers are kind of salty because they weren't invited to this thing. It was kind of a manufacturer side thing. But I don't know. They're trying to promote kayaking, right? I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, maybe you should ask them, but I guess I share your skepticism for a number of reasons, but it's like there is, I think like Outdoor Industry Association, for example, like not even thinking about their public lands agenda, but like having an entity in Washington, D.C. working on like trade policy, like that seems to be beneficial, like just trying to reduce tariffs on goods brought in by the outdoor industry. Like that seems to be like a pretty clear benefit to the industry. And like, I don't know what the, maybe the specific issues that are important to the paddle sports industry are better handled by, ACA in their responsibilities for like instructor trainer certification and like things like that, and AW working on conservation issues, and like maybe like
that's why I mentioned those guys.
Like I guess let's say maybe paddle sports doesn't need it, but like to me the idea that like there's
the ACA and USCKT and American Whitewater Rivers, don't we're kind of covering important stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's a question for you guys, but I mean, if it's the goal is just to promote paddle sports, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, that seems silly. It's like you guys all do that on your own, and like,
and I don't know if this is what these guys are after, but I do know there's a notion out there that if we could just market paddle sports better, we'd have more participation, which I don't know that I agree with in general. Like, I think the marketplace has to be interested in this thing to begin with. I think Americans by and large know what paddle sports is all about, and they've kind of agreed as a nation that they're not that interested in it.
And like, aren't we blessed by that?
Exactly. I mean, there's an upside to that as well. I mean, it's tough to run a business, but Little White's not that crowded, right?
Worse every day.
An organization like this that's going to stoke the sport. I mean, there's going to be a lawyer involved. There's going to be a good idea. It's going to get muddied up. It's going to come out stale. There's going to burn through some money. They should just give it to AW. Call it good.
Right.
Get some more releases. Give to Scott Shipley to build some more whitewater parks. That'd be better.
I mean, I think there's some things we need to do as an industry, like a paddle sports industry. For one, get back into the outdoor industry, not try and go it alone. But that's my opinion. I think there's some things we should agree to do, and we could discuss this over a beer somewhere. But I don't know if we need an organization.
I mean, I think that's the process, right? Is it's like you guys. The first step is like, what is it we want to do? What is it we need to do?
Well, that's
and then you decide if you need an organization, not like you create an organization and then like, what are we going to do?
I mean, that's the thing. You get 20 manufacturers together. Everyone has their own agenda. I know the 4 or 5 things that mean something to me don't mean anything else to anybody else. They could give a flying whatever, you know? And I think that's where these things, that's why we've had 10 of these in the past 10 years and none of them gone anywhere. They all fall apart after a couple of years. But listen, if someone from the Paddle Sports Trade Coalition is listening and wants to come on and shut me down, you know, it's the Hammer Factor. That's what we're all about.
Picking
very passionately
argued, what we do.
What's that?
So picking industry fights is what we do.
No. It's a collection of we passionately argue about things we don't really care that much about.
If they want to get thousands of people watching kayaking, make lifelong kayakers and whatever, they can come talk to me.
Play boating.
I do that every Saturday.
Park and play boating. Yeah, freestyle events. That's been the clear pathway to success.
Squirt boating.
Lewis, shut us down. Shut us down, Lewis.
We need a squirt boating association. That's clearly what that industry needs to grow.
My in-laws are in town. Can you guys shut us down so I can go hang out?
I want to read about John Le Carre.
Come on, really?
Okay. All right,
this is a paddle sports show.
Let's hear it.
I've read like 10 John Le Carre novels in the last like 6 months, probably. Just like, I don't know, Cold War, espionage, moral ambivalence. It's got it all. Good writing.
And suppose it's better than Infinite Jest.
I can't believe this is
I have mixed feelings about Infinite Jest, but I don't love it as passionately as you do, but I'm glad I read it.
We're going to save Infinite Jest for the next show. Grace, you're going to have to read Infinite Jest by the time we record again, which will be in about 3 years if I'm doing my math correctly.
Everybody, thanks for listening to the Hammer Factor. We will have a show together for you soon. Big props to Evan and Pete and Robbie and Lou, and have a happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Well, about gravel bike.
Finally.
You bought a gravel bike?
Stay out of this, Grace.